Sonic Advance 1 is a pretty important part of Sonic's history when you really think about it. Not only because this was obviously the first entry in the Advance trilogy, but also that Sonic Advance 1 along with Sonic Adventure 2 Battle were both released in Japan side by side on December 20th, 2001. Right near the end of the Blue Hedgehog's 10th anniversary, and also marking the first two Sonic games to ever be on Nintendo platforms. Seriously, that had to have been insane to see as a 90s kid going on to the early 2000s. Anyways, I couldn't really find any information on the development history for this game. I mean, neither could Gavin and Jack, or Johnny, or anyone else who's reviewed this game. Though kinda like how everyone else has pointed out, here's an important thing to say about Advance 1. While some members of Sonic Team helped put this game together, Advance was mainly being developed by the Dimps Corporation, and at the time, in-house development team at Sega. Put the pitchforks down, Sonic fans. This is early Dimps. The good Dimps. The Yuji Naka still producing these games Dimps. Okay, apart from the fact that Dimps made this game, oh, fun fact, the Game Boy Advance was released as early as March 2001, and Sonic Advance was released as early as December 2001. So this game kind of had like 9 months of development put into it. I pointed out because I will applaud Dimps and Sonic Team for managing to get this game released in the same launch year as the GBA. So, yeah, good job, boys. I'm also going to assume this game started being made right after the Dreamcast stopped being produced because this happened right around when the GBA was released in Japan. The timing couldn't be more coincidental. What's the point of me mentioning all of this? Because this is a lesson that when all else is failing around you, just remember that there is a silver lining in everything. I'm actually wasting all your time, so let's talk about the actual game now. So the plot of Sonic Advance involves...
Oh great, Cooper's about to spend 13 hours talking about the plot of a Sonic game again. Yawn. Just get to the gameplay already, jeez!
Can you please shut up? The plot of Sonic Advance is really, really simple. Dr. Eggman shows up and starts turning animals into robots again, then Sonic and the gang show up to stop him, and that's it. Oh yeah, the Chaos Emeralds are also there too, but I'll get to them later. Advance 1 having a really simplistic story seems like it was more of a no-choice decision on Dimps' end, since this was their first GBA game, which was also being developed on a tight schedule. Again, this was mostly 7 to 8 months worth of development. So in the end, I'm kinda glad they went the safer route for this game's story. That meant they could also direct their focus for the gameplay and levels. And that's kinda all I have to say about the story until a little bit later, so it's very simple and gets the job done. So in Advance 1, you can play as Sonic, obviously, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy Rose, making her first playable 2D appearance. The gameplay in Sonic Advance is a major highlight, and for the other two games if I want to jump the gun for a bit. The physics, controls, and overall feel of this game is a practically perfect replication of the Genesis gameplay. When playing as Sonic, he's kind of the least entertaining out of the 4 characters. However, in my opinion, I'd say that he's the perfect character to start out as. He has the Spin Dash from Sonic 2 again, and he's also equipped with the Insta-Shield from Sonic 3, though it's nowhere near as broken as the original Insta-Shield. Still fun though. Tails and Knuckles also have their movesets from the Genesis games, so both of them can spin dash, Tails can fly, and not to mention Knuckles can glide and climb on walls. Knuckles can also punch enemies by pressing the B button. I don't use it too often, but I love this inclusion because of how simple it is. It's a fun detail. Sonic Mania didn't even give Knuckles a punch move. Yikes. The fourth and last playable character is Amy Rose. Amy is kind of the exact opposite of Sonic. While Sonic is the perfect beginner, Amy is for the more skilled players. She can't spin dash or even jump on enemies normally. Her main form of attacking is by using her hammer by pressing the B button. So you can jump in the air and use a spinning hammer attack to jump into enemies, though it does kind of require proper timing. Because of these limits, Amy isn't really the best character to start out as. So I would recommend Amy as the 4th playthrough of the game after you give Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles full playthroughs. That's exactly what I did, and as a result I ended up adapting to Amy's gameplay style rather quickly after understanding the level designs better. It's a bit of trial and error, but I ended up thoroughly enjoying Amy's playthrough whenever I got around to playing as her. She's definitely a love it or hate it character in this game, but if I could advise, just don't pick her as the first character you play as. Otherwise, of course you're gonna hate her gameplay style. But that's kind of the key for enjoying Amy's gameplay style, mainly with just knowing the levels and zones. One thing I was really surprised by with Sonic Advance 1 was that the level design is really solid. Whenever I play a 2D Sonic game, I'm often looking for something that offers a bit more than just hold right to win, you know? I'm always in favor of altering pathways and hidden objects and maybe other Easter eggs you put in the levels. And from the first level to maybe all the way to the end, I think Sonic Advance nails this really well. Especially when playing through this game 4 times as 4 different characters with different movesets, I ended up having pretty unique playthroughs for all of them separately. There's a lot of points in Sonic Advance's levels that just makes me smile. It really does feel like Sonic Advance had a lot of craft and care put into its level designs. It's not the best in the series, like it doesn't top Sonic 3 and Knuckles or anything like that, but it's still really good. Like, you could tackle all of these levels and have completely different experiences based off what pathways you go down. You can find your preferred routes, you can find different pathways that bring you to locations in the levels that make you go, holy shit, this was here all this time? I never knew. This is how you do solid 2D level design for Sonic games. And I'm pretty happy to see that Dimps' first outing of a Sonic game managed to do this really well. Okay, I know what you guys are probably waiting for me to mention, but yes, some core members of Dimps did work on the Sonic Pocket adventure for the Neo Geo Pocket Color, but I honestly don't care about that game and I don't think it's that important to point out, so I'm just gonna stick with saying Sonic Advance 1 was their first Sonic game because it's better. There are the complaints that people have where it's like, oh, there's too many bottomless pits. But to be honest, I never encountered any bottomless pits until I got to Angel Island. But even then, it doesn't make that much illogical sense for there to be a bottomless pit in Angel Island. Even some of the main sections come with little platforms that give you sort of slight hints that, oh, if I fall off these platforms, I'm probably gonna hit a bottomless pit. So I think there are enough clues and hints to where you won't be killed randomly by a bottomless pit out of nowhere. Hint, hint. Even the last 2 levels having bottomless pits in them didn't bother me, but I guess that's mainly because they're the last levels in the game, so that kind of challenge I was kind of expecting. Is it a bit overused? I wouldn't say we're there just yet. Trust me. But I will say the level design in Sonic Advance is really good. Casino Paradise is one of my all-time favorite levels in this game because that level just... it's so fun. And if you want to see this as a true Sonic 4, I think that this is a great follow-up to, say, Casino Night and Carnival Night from Sonic 2 and 3. It looks like a really cool mishmash of both those levels, which I think is a great look for this game. I guess speaking of looks, let's talk about the art style and graphics. Sonic Advance is using the modern aesthetic, and to be perfectly honest, I'm really happy about that. The sprite work in Sonic Advance is stellar. The animation of the characters running looks really good. It's just so rich in detail. I'd highly recommend looking up the sprite sheets for all the characters in this game because it'll really give you a better viewpoint of how much effort was put into this game's artwork. Like, look at all these individual sprites they had to draw for just Sonic. That's fucking crazy. And it pays off because Sonic Advance looks really good for a launch year Game Boy title. Another highlight I have for Sonic Advance is how all the levels are original, and because of that we get these beautiful looking original environments. It really helps in this game's favor, and I love Sonic Advance's art style so much. I'd even go as far to say I think the sprite work here looks better than Sonic Mania. Whoops. Another highlight for this game is the soundtrack. I heard a lot of people and even some close friends of mine say that they don't think the soundtrack in Sonic Advance is as good as the other games, but I'd actually go as far to say that this is one of my favorite Sonic soundtracks. I love a lot of the original tracks in this game. I say original because there are a few remixes of Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 music that are in this game, which I think is really cool and nice. I don't know, I'm kind of a sucker for old school graphics and music, so the music sounding kind of bit crunched to me doesn't bother me too much. I'd recommend looking up the fan project, well, I think it's a fan project called the Sonic Advance and Battle Music Collection Remastered. It's basically a project that remasters all the GBA music to be in the highest quality they could possibly be in, and it all sounds pretty damn good, so I recommend looking that up, especially version 3. There's a lot of great songs in Sonic Advance 1's soundtrack. A few highlights for me are Secret Base Act 2, seriously that level track is pumpin'. Both acts of Ice Mountain because they sound beautiful. And Cosmic Angel because that is great Final Zone music. It's fast paced and really awesome. I don't really know where else to fit this, but this kind of goes back to the graphics. The elemental shields weren't brought back, except for one, which was the electric shield, which doesn't let Sonic double jump anymore, but it still attracts rings to you, so that's pretty cool. They also brought back the standard blue shield, but they changed the green for this game because... I don't know, I don't care, looks aesthetically nice. Moving on to the boss fights, this is actually really simple to talk about because, well, they're all kinda simple. All the boss fights in this game are kinda just about waiting for an opening to hit Eggman, and it's incredibly basic and easy. Yeah, these bosses aren't too memorable or good. Then again, they've never really been all that mind-blowing in 2D Sonic games before. They serve their purpose as boss fights, but they're kind of forgettable. The final boss is also insanely easy too. It's not a very good way to end the game normally. Just like many other Sonic games, you have to collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds through the special stages to reach the true final boss and to get the good ending. To access the special stages, in specific acts of zones, there are these special springs that are hidden in the levels. I honestly love this inclusion of reaching the special stages, because it helps encourage exploration in a similar fashion as the special rings in Sonic 3 and Knuckles did. Another thing I love is that the Chaos Emeralds are shared across all characters. So if you wanted to, you could just get all of them with one character. I'd recommend using Tails because of his flying ability, which pretty much makes it easier for him to reach certain spots in the levels to find the special springs to get into the stages. Now, the special stages themselves are kind of a mixed bag. The gimmick here is that you're falling down a 3-dimensional pipe and you have to collect as many rings as possible in 2 different cycles, while also avoiding many obstacles like spikes or bombs. This is a pretty unique idea for an original special stage, but the biggest flaw with these stages is kind of obvious by just looking at it. The depth perception here is pretty bad, so you can often find yourself missing entire rows of rings just because you didn't properly position yourself above them. So this can seriously take a good while to get used to. What also kinda sucks is that whenever you lose a special stage, you have to restart the game. Because when you lose one, it'll take you back to the stage where you're right next to the special spring, but now it's just gonna operate as a regular spring, and it's not gonna let you go back into the special stage. And also one little oversight is that they didn't put a quit option in the pause menu, so you have to literally restart the entire game. So you gotta go through the process of skipping the intro, choosing a character, then going back to choosing the stage. A simple quit option would have been very much appreciated. Kind of a weird oversight, but whatever. These graphics do look pretty good for the GBA, but they just didn't age too well. I also can't imagine beating these stages while playing them on the original dark screen GBA, so maybe the SP model with the backlight can be very beneficial here. One pretty good tip I got from a YouTube commenter of all places was that pressing the B button can make you spin in place, which can actually extend your character's hitbox to collect more rings. This is incredibly useful and it saved my ass on so many scenarios. The amount of rings I could have missed without using the B attack would have been terrible. So this move was pretty helpful, but Special Stage 7 though? I'm never gonna forget that headache. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is that before you could even get to the final stage of Sonic, you kinda have to beat the game as Tails, Knuckles, and Amy to unlock the new stage. Yeah, collecting all the Chaos Emeralds isn't enough. You have to play through the stages as every character. I don't mind, but then again, there are some people who think one playthrough of this game is a bit too much, so forcing the players to play it 4 times while also having to deal with collecting all the Chaos Emeralds, yeah, that could be a bit tiring for some. It doesn't bother me personally, but I could understand why it would not be too fun for everyone else. So after you get all the emeralds, go beat the final zone as Sonic and you'll get an extra cutscene showing him turn into Super Sonic. This leads Sonic to flying to the true final level, Moon Zone, which is home to a very easy final boss. Kind of disappointing. Then again, all the boss fights in Advance 1 have been pretty incredibly easy to begin with, so not too much of a big deal, in my opinion at least. This also has that one minor issue where this is the only part of the game where Super Sonic is playable. I used to be really bothered by this, but I don't really think it's that huge a deal. A lot of these levels weren't really designed for Super Sonic in mind. I mean, neither were the classics. But I would imagine back then those were just oversights. But for Advance 1, maybe Dimps figured they didn't want to include this game-breaking feature in their game too. So, whatever, Super Sonic is only playable in the final boss fight. Again. In other news, the sky is blue, water is wet, and Advance 2 kinda sucks. What else is new? Despite these slight issues I have with the Moon Zone, I do really love the final cutscene of this game, and I think it makes it completely worth getting all the emeralds. After Sonic beats Eggman, he apparently goes missing for a few days according to this text box. That's a pretty interesting path for the story to go. Then it cuts to Tails flying in the tornado looking for Sonic. Then he ends up coming across him falling down from outer space. Then we get this cool close-up of Sonic who looks right at the screen and gives us that iconic smile, followed by the usual "thank you for playing" text. I don't know why, I love the execution of this final cutscene. It's pulled off in an extremely simple way, but it speaks volumes for this game's rather simplistic story. The music track that plays during this cutscene is also one of my favorites from the soundtrack. It's such a huge highlight. This was a really nice way to close off this game, and I'll honestly never forget this. Fantastic. Then again, I'm the type of loser to focus on story elements in Sonic games, and meanwhile, several people in the comments section will just bitch at me to focus on the gameplay, and that stories in Sonic games don't matter or whatever, but hey, I guess not all people can appreciate good storytelling or have as great taste in fine art as I do. Before I wrap up, there are like 2 other things I want to mention about this game. There's the usual sound test, which is pretty fun, I think. I like the image of Amy just rocking those maracas while you're playing the songs in the sound test. I think that's really fun. There's also this tiny Chow Garden. It's mainly for people who were into the Chow Garden in SA1 and SA2. To be honest, I'm not going to talk about this for too long because it's nowhere near as good as the Chow Gardens on the consoles. But for people who enjoyed those, I'm sure you would appreciate this little distraction. You can basically hatch Chows or even transfer Chows from SA1 to SA2 on the GameCube, which I think is pretty cool. I do like the tiny Chow Garden, but it doesn't have a whole lot to offer. Again, in comparison to SA1 and SA2 Chow Gardens, this is really lacking. But hey, I had some enjoyment with it. Oh yeah, Sonic Advance also had multiplayer? Using the link cable, obviously. It's pretty interesting. I've never really gotten a chance to play it for myself, but if you have access to a link cable and you have friends who play Sonic Advance, definitely give it a shot. It's pretty cool from what I've seen of it. Oh yeah, there's also this really fun cheat you could do in the menu where you could play as Sonic and Tails in story mode. Basically, when you're at the character select, have it on Sonic, then do up, right, down, right, L, right, R, right, then A. Then just choose a level, then you're gonna be playing as Sonic with Tails following behind him. So I guess for the people who enjoyed having Tails follow them in Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 and even Sonic Mania, you can try this out here, and it's pretty fun. Though if you're like me and you played the shit out of Advance 3, you're probably gonna find yourself holding the R button expecting the tag mechanic to work, but that doesn't exist yet. Holy shit, I just realized how amazing the tag mechanic would be in Advance 1. Hey! GBA hackers, get on that, please! Okay, that's pretty much everything this game has to offer, so how exactly does Sonic Advance 1 hold up? Honestly, I'm surprised by how much I actually enjoyed playing this game as every character. It takes a lot for a Sonic game to expect me to play it 4 full times, and I ended up doing that with Sonic Advance without any issue. I think I loved Advance 1, like, a lot. And I'm pretty happy about that. I'm really glad that I enjoyed this game. Would I say this is one of my favorite Sonic games? I'd say I'd still have to let this game sit with me for a little while, but after getting to properly play through the trilogy, I'd definitely say that this is my second favorite Advance game. I think Advance 1 is a good 2D Sonic game with a fantastic art style, a catchy soundtrack, solid level design, and just an overall wholesome experience for a Sonic game. Yeah, I think that's my one-word review of Sonic Advance 1. Wholesome. Now, a very important question arises. Do I think Sonic Advance 1 is the true Sonic 4? And do I find this game to be better than Sonic Mania? To both? Yes.
What? How? I thought you loved Sonic Mania! Who are you and where is Cooper Castile?
First off, I'm right here. Second, people change, so opinions can change. It happens. It's natural. There's no reason to panic. That's just life. But anyways, I think Sonic Advance 1 is the true Sonic 4 because I believe this one truly felt like it was the continuation of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. This game also just came from the Sonic team and Dimps who actually cared. Like I said at the start of this review, this was the Yuji Naka still producing these games era for Sonic the Hedgehog. So in a way, this was probably the closest to his own vision of how a sequel to Sonic 3 and Knuckles would have been. I'm not saying Mr. Naka's word is the only correct one, but I just personally have a lot of respect for the man. And I also just think that Advance 1 feels like an actual, well, advancement for 2D Sonic games. This is the type of evolution Yuji Naka probably would have had in mind. And I just think Sonic Advance 1 does this way better than Sonic Mania, or especially Sonic 4 could have pulled off. Sonic Advance is probably going to hold a special place in my heart that's way stronger than anything I feel from Sonic Mania will. Don't get me wrong now, I do like Sonic Mania a lot, and I've put over 200 hours into that game that I will never, ever take back. But I just feel like Advance 1's originality and clever nods to the classics were executed way better here than anything that was put into Sonic Mania. Though I don't really think that's a very fair comparison since Sonic Mania came out during this classic Sonic crazy era for Sonic right now, and was also made by a specific group of fans who only really enjoyed the classic Sonic games. You know the group I'm talking about. The ones who would say the adventure games were only 1/3 good, and other stuff. That's where I feel Sonic Mania came from, which isn't a bad thing, but it does kind of show this type of pessimistic towards modern Sonic attitude, which I just personally disagree with, IMO. But meanwhile, Sonic Advance was developed in-house by Dimps and a part of Sonic Team, was produced by Yuji Naka himself, and uses the modern Sonic aesthetics as a form of evolution, rather than going back to the classic aesthetics, which I just personally feel now is a huge step back. But, you know, whatever. It's just the way I feel about these games. People are gonna have different preferences, and we're not always gonna agree on everything. And that's totally fine. I'm sure there are gonna be some people who have been following my channel for a while leaving hate comments pointing out what I just said seems incredibly hypocritical because maybe I said something completely different to what I said in a couple episodes of Cooper's Perspective from like 2 to 3 years ago. I don't have any way of controlling that, and people can think whatever they want to think, so whatever. Anyways, Sonic Advance 1 is a good game, and I wholeheartedly recommend this game to any Sonic fan who likes the 2D games and somehow has not played this. You're missing out. It's a solid title. Though, good luck with finding it if you don't have a Game Boy Advance, an older model DS, or even the GameCube's GBA player. Sadly, none of the Advance games have seen that many re-releases. Well, at least not in the States. Sonic Advance 1 got a couple ports, but rarely did these ports come to the US. In 2003, the game saw a port for the Nokia N-Gage as Sonic N. Some of you might have already heard of this, and are also aware that it doesn't look very good. It suffers from awful screen crunch, and even with the letterboxing option, it looks way too blurry, which is kind of an insult to this game's great art style. Then again, who the heck is gonna go out of their way to buy this crappy and rare handheld device to play a bad port of Sonic Advance 1, when you could be better off getting an actual GBA and the original version of Advance 1 for way cheaper? You know what would have been way more convenient? Remember when the Wii U's Virtual Console had Game Boy Advance games put on it? And the Wii U's emulation for GBA games is insanely good. Like, really good and spot on. Gee, it sure would have been nice if the Advance games came to the Wii U. Well, guess what? They did! But only in Japan. Yep, all 3 Sonic Advance games are available digitally through the Japanese eShop for the Wii U. I mean, that's great for everyone in Japan, but for others outside of Japan? Well, you're screwed. The Wii U was a region-locked system, so unless you want to go out of your way to hard mod your Wii U to be region-free, or even shell out the money to import a Japanese Wii U to play these games, I don't think it's too worth it. Plus, importing a Wii U would also mean you have to get a gamepad imported too because, well, Nintendo region-locked the gamepad as well. Yeah, Nintendo region-locked a controller. Try to wrap your mind around that. Thank Christ the Nintendo Switch is region-free. I know this won't happen anytime soon, but I am hoping that Nintendo changes their minds and brings back the GBA Virtual Console for the Switch. The emulator on the Wii U is already perfect, and I really would not want to see that thing go to waste. Not to mention, it would feel almost right at home playing these GBA games on a console that's also portable. It would be perfect. Please, Nintendo and Sega, you would literally make tons of money on this idea. God damn it. Okay, one more thing to mention. Did you guys know that Sonic Advance 1 got an Android port? Was that? You didn't? Well, that's probably because you don't have an Android phone that's from Japan. Yeah, for some reason, Advance 1 got a port on Android phones, but it was only available digitally in Japan. Again, really ironic how Japan got all these digital ports of Sonic games when Sonic the Hedgehog isn't even that popular in this country. Pull the tapeworm out of your ass, Sega of Japan, for crying out loud. A brief rundown of this port. It's not very good. I think it might have increased the screen resolution, which is a good thing, but the soundtrack is pretty badly mediaified, kind of like what happened with the Sonic and Knuckles collection. I also don't think the gameplay looks too solid either, so I wouldn't say going out of your way to play this mobile port is that much worth it. So, I guess right now, if you're not in Japan, the best way to play Sonic Advance is on the original GBA cart. So go hunt down a copy of this game and play it on whatever platform you could play it on, be it GBA, backwards compatible DS, or the elusive GBA player for the GameCube, which is what I used. I highly recommend getting this thing. These games fit right at home playing on a good TV, which is excellent news. Or I guess you can use emulators if you don't see that as a huge deal. Smartasses. So this review's kind of been a long time coming, unless you're watching this for the first time in the GBA compilation and you have no idea what I'm talking about. 5 years ago, I looked at Sonic Advance 1, and to summarize my feelings, I seriously love that game. It's easily my second favorite of the Advance trilogy, right behind Advance 3, and I could honestly just go back to play it again and again. Sonic Advance 2, however, yeah. This game and I have a pretty interesting history. The first time I got to play it was on an emulator around a decade ago when I tried recording a playthrough of it for my old Let's Play channel, Cooper Plays Games. But I only got about 4 zones in until I decided to stop playing. Those Let's Play videos no longer exist, by the way, so I wouldn't recommend trying to find them. That was my first real experience with Sonic Advance 2, and I think that Let's Play attempt was my first time playing any of the Advance games, unless me playing Advance 3 on a modded PSP predates it somehow. There wasn't too much development info I could find about Advance 2, which is pretty in line for the other GBA games as well. It was developed once again by Dimps and apparently started production immediately after the completion of Advance 1, beginning in February of 2002, meaning development only lasted about 8 months. Advance 2 was first revealed at the Tokyo Toy Show in 2002, and an early trailer for the game would be featured in Sonic Mega Collection, which was released in November 2002, just 1 month before Advance 2. This early trailer would feature a few beta elements left over in the game, like an early title screen, slightly different character sprites, and even some older level layouts. There's also an early screenshot that was featured on the official Sonic the Hedgehog website back in the day, featuring the 4 main playable characters, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Cream. But in the screenshot, you can see the life icon is a miscolored Amy, which is kinda funny. And that's basically all the early development info I have for the game. Sonic Advance 2 would first be released in Japan on December 19th, 2002. Yep, just 1 year after Advance 1. So they made this game fast. And Advance 2 would also be released in other regions in March 2003. Before I just jump into the game, I did want to talk about how, while I did grow up with a Game Boy Advance SP, I never had the chance to play any of the Advance games or even Battle. However, I do have some minor nostalgia for certain aspects of Advance 2, mainly the graphics and music, thanks to an old fan game known as Ultimate Flash Sonic. Yeah, I probably just dug up an old memory for a lot of you that were watching, but this Flash game was pretty fun, even though it's really short. It only has 2 zones with 2 acts and a boss fight each, so that's only like 4 levels. It was first released around February 2004, just a few months before Advance 3 came out. And yes, that means this Flash game is 20 years old, which really shows in a lot of areas, but it's still a neat little thing from my childhood that I like bringing up. I remember this game running slow as hell on my old computer way back when, so it's weird to me seeing it run so fluently. Even though it's just 4 levels, there's still some pretty fun things you can could unlock, like 2 extra characters, Shadow and Amy, and it even had its own cheat codes and password system. By the way, this code unlocks everything. You're welcome. I guess if I could offer more of a proper analysis, for a fan game in 2004, the level design is pretty on par with Advance 2, which is both good and bad, but it's not horrible, for a fan game. Actually, the level designs here are pretty ahead of their time when it comes to predicting how modern day dimps would go on to make future games. Like placing dash pads at any part of the level like before you run up a loop, and even finding them on the walls and ramps that you're running on. Seriously, why are those there? This can be excused because clearly a young fan made this game and wasn't really a master at level design. So what exactly were the adults who made Sonic 4 Episode 1 and 2's excuse? This Flash game even ends by proclaiming, "Sonic Team rules! Now go and buy Sonic Advance 2, the best game ever!" Really? The best game ever? Well, thank you Dennis for the recommendation. Let's finally have a look at Sonic Advance 2. The story of Advance 2 is just as basic as before. Dr. Eggman returns and is up to no good again, so Sonic has to go stop him. While on this adventure, Sonic ends up needing to rescue Tails and new character Cream the Rabbit. Nothing too out of the ordinary happens, apart from one boss encounter later which, at first, you can see is being operated by Knuckles instead of Eggman. Wait, what? Yeah, Eggman apparently tricked Knuckles into fighting Sonic again. It's kinda funny, but the encounter only lasts just one boss fight and cutscene. Literally nothing else comes from this. Well, Sonic and the gang eventually catch up with Eggman in space, again, and defeat this giant robot he built. The game's normal ending shows whichever character you're playing as falling all the way down from space, as Eggman's base collapses from the sky above them. However, just like the other 2D games, this is not the true ending. After getting all 7 Chaos Emeralds, Sonic is treated to the true ending. Cream's mother, Vanilla, also in her series debut, gets kidnapped by another device that Eggman built, and it takes her up to outer space. So Sonic goes super and heads to space to defeat Eggman's contraption, and rescues Vanilla in the process. Once again surviving falling all the way down from space? But whatever. And that's it. That's the basic gist of Advance 2's story. Apart from that brief encounter with Knuckles, there isn't too much really going on here apart from Eggman just being up to his old schemes. Again. The biggest additions to Advance 2 are easily Cream the Rabbit and her mother Vanilla. Cream is one of my favorite characters in the series. She's a great counterpart to Tails, and she's even traveling around with her own child companion, Cheese. Get it? Cream and Cheese. Cream the Rabbit was originally made for Sonic Heroes, but the developers decided to put her in Advance 2. I guess that way so the game could have a new playable character. She would go on to appear in future games, even though recently she's made less and less appearances in some of the more major titles, apart from the Olympic Games series, which is now dead. Uh-oh. While I would consider Cream an underused character nowadays, Vanilla is far worse in comparison to her daughter. Like, Cream at least got to appear in the other games, including 3D ones. Vanilla would only ever appear in Advance 2 and 3, appeared for a few dialogue boxes in Sonic Rush, had a decent sized role in the Sonic X anime, and that's it. She has yet to appear again in any of the games, and it's a damn shame. I'm thankful the comics still use her, but I'm sad the games themselves just don't feature her at all. Though I will say, I do like that Vanilla makes an appearance in Cream's ending cutscene. It's cute. But overall, Sonic Advance 2's story is incredibly basic, most likely due to the game's tight development schedule. It's still alright for what it does, and the inclusion of Cream, Cheese, and Vanilla is really sweet. So I'm hard pressed to point out anything wrong with the game's plot or characters, unless I'm missing something. Wait a minute, where the hell is Amy? Let's get to the gameplay. For the most part, this gameplay is pretty similar to Advance 1, mainly since it was built off the same engine. You start out as Sonic and eventually unlock the rest of the characters as the game goes on. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles basically play the exact same, with some minor tweaks. So all of them can spin dash, Sonic has his insta-shield, Tails can fly, and Knuckles can glide and punch. Sonic also seems to have a new homing attack move, similar to the 3D games, but it's a little weird to figure out. I never really saw much use for it because jumping on enemies works just fine. The biggest addition to this game is obviously Cream the Rabbit, who can play pretty similar to Tails, in the sense that she can also fly by using her ears. However, Cream is also being followed by Cheese at all times, which means if you press the B button, Cream can send Cheese to attack any nearby enemy and boss in order to kill/harm them. Oh yes, Cream and Cheese are easily the most broken characters in the game, and they could really make it a total cakewalk to play. While Tails is who I'd usually consider the easy mode for these games, Cream and Cheese are basically a super easy mode. Like, seriously, you can completely decimate boss fights using Cheese. It is a horrendously broken move, but I honestly love it. Fun fact, in Sonic Heroes, Cream and Cheese still had this ability, but you rarely, if not never, get to use it. Since Cream was the flying type, she's always carrying the other two characters. So you'll most likely have to just install a mod that lets you play as the flying characters on their own, just so you can use the Cheese attack in Heroes. I love the way Cream plays on her own. It's pretty solid 3D gameplay for her, apart from the missing spin dash. She seriously has so much potential to be a lot of fun to play as in 3D, and I really hope she becomes playable again in a future game. But getting back to Advance 2, one new feature for every character that's actually a pretty cool concept is that if you run fast for long enough, you can activate this boost mode of sorts. It can make you move a lot faster with an afterimage following you. Visually it looks cool, and conceptually, it's an interesting idea, but I don't think Advance 2 really executed it well. This isn't really because the mode itself is awful, but more, the rest of the game doesn't really help it seem special. Yeah, we seem to have already arrived at this topic, but my personal biggest gripe with Sonic Advance 2 is actually a pretty crucial part of the entire game, the level design. Something you may have noticed with Advance 2 just from watching the gameplay is that speed is a huge focus. I know, no shit, it's a Sonic game, but I think Advance 2 really leans in on this the most in comparison to the other Advance games. This might be the fastest Sonic has ever been on a handheld game, until the Rush games I guess. The speed really is impressive for the GBA to pull off at that time, and I heard that a working title for the game was apparently See Sonic Run. Unfortunately, this constant great burst of speed results in the sacrifice of interesting level design. Every single level in Advance 2 is designed almost the exact same. Some of the later zones do try changing things up, for the worst, but a lot of the earlier stages feel very samey. My ideal level design for Sonic isn't just about going super fast all the time, but also including a bunch of different routes and allowing the player to explore the environments in order to maybe find better pathways or even bonus stuff like ring boxes and whatnot. Advance 2 doesn't really do this that often, and at points it often feels like I'm playing a prequel to Sonic 4 Episode 2. This game really holds true to that old hold right to win stereotype that most 2D Sonic games got back then, and seeing how this is a lot of people's favorite game in the Advance trilogy, I feel like that also kind of damaged the reputation for the other 2D Sonic games, even the classic ones. All the levels being constantly similarly designed can be pretty disappointing for fans like me who don't want to just go fast all the time. It especially doesn't help when the acts are too short, and nothing really sticks with me as a result. For me, I've always felt that speed is supposed to be a reward, not something that's constantly given to you like candy. Because most of Advance 2's levels have you running fast all the time, it kind of makes the boost mode feel less special to use when you get it because you're already almost always running super fast. So who really gives a shit when you slightly run faster for a few seconds? And a lot of you are gonna hate hearing me say this, and I'm gonna mention this a few times in the review, but I think Advance 3 handled this aspect way better, as much as Advance 2 fans may hate that game's level design. One of the more annoying gimmicks for me were the grind rails, which did appear in Advance 1 a few times, but only Sonic and Amy were able to use them. Advance 2 not only brings back the grind rails, but lets every character be able to use them. That's the good part. The bad part is that every level kind of overuses them. Like, I get it, they were a cool thing in Sonic Adventure 2, and putting them in the 2D games was a pretty good idea, but the way they're used in Advance 2 is really not too great. Not only are they a bit overused, but mechanically they just don't work very well. You can only hop on them from a flat surface, then you can slide on them just fine. But if you try jumping at them from any other angle, including a slanted one, you're not gonna land on them, you just phase through. Not only can this make the grind rails seem like they just don't want to work sometimes, but it could also lead to you straight up dying when a grind rail easily could have saved you. Something is horribly wrong when I feel like the grind rails in Ultimate Flash Sonic function better. Plus, Advance 3 would go on to improve the grind rails in terms of level placement and how they functioned. God, I love Advance 3. I'd rather be playing that. Moving on, there's one other problem with this game's levels, and it really becomes apparent in the later half of the game. The first 4 zones, while feeling repetitive, are fine enough on their own, but the moment you hit Sky Canyon, this game really goes downhill. Literally, into a bottomless pit. The issue not only lies with how just bad the level layouts can be, but Sky Canyon is one of those levels where bottomless pits are a huge issue for the game. Bottomless pits are a pretty common complaint for dimp Sonic games, and I feel like Sonic Advance 2 was the first time they really became a huge issue. They were there in Advance 1, but it was only on a few occasions and only in some of the later levels, so they weren't overused, especially not in comparison to how Advance 2 just loves them. Advance 2's bottomless pits aren't just annoying because they can be so frequent, but a different issue is that the game has another special move that the characters can use, which it also kind of fails at explaining to the player, unless they read the manual or check the game's options menu. Advance 2 introduced a new trick move. When you launch off a ramp or most springs, pressing R in a certain direction on the D-pad can make your character do a special move in the air. This could include dashing forward or launching yourself up to a higher section. The trick move is an insanely cool idea, and I'm glad Advance 2 introduced it, but it did not execute it well at all. For the most part, while you can use the trick moves in the first 4 zones, they're not really required to beat the levels. That is not the case for the last 3 zones. Sky Canyon has become a pretty infamous zone for fans because it has some pretty irritating sections where, if you don't use the move, you will fall straight to your death. Again, the game never tells you how to use the move or that it's required for the later levels, so you'll very likely get blindsided by this and keep dying in Sky Canyon without understanding how you're supposed to even beat the damn level. I cannot believe how badly Advance 2 fumbled this really good idea, which again, Advance 3 utilized way better, and this legitimately makes the game lose so many points for me. So if you don't know how to use this trick move in some of the later levels, then you are absolutely going to die. Trying to balance out this review by talking about things I do like, the graphics and art style are incredible. Advance 1 already looked terrific, but Advance 2 does a really great job expanding on this style. Every level can be vibrant and colorful, and while I personally don't just like plowing through every single one of them super fast all the time, the huge burst of colors and scenery quickly moving past you can be very mesmerizing to watch. No slowdown issues either, which is very impressive for the GBA in 2002. I'll always have a soft spot for that late 90s, early 2000s Yuji Yukawa-san style, so I'm glad Advance 2 was made in this era because the graphics really benefit from it. The soundtrack is probably the best part of the game for me. Every level has catchy and memorable music, and much like the gameplay itself, the tracks are very fast paced. My favorite track is easily Hot Crater Act 1. Not too big on this level, in fact it's probably the first one where some of the worst ideas in this game start being introduced, but the music is fantastic and really thrilling to run around listening to. Plus, one kinda cool idea that Advance 2 included were these pinch phases for the boss music, which can make the battles feel more fast-paced and intense, even though I'm not super huge on the boss fights themselves. Looking at the zones themselves, I personally don't have too much to say about them because I just think they're all way too similar to each other. But starting with Leaf Forest, it's an okay standard first level, but it's pretty bland in terms of level design. Probably the most plain out of every zone. Seriously, you can mostly just hold right to win here and you'll be fine. Leaf Forest doesn't lose as many points as the others since it is the first, and the music is pretty spectacular. It's a fantastic track that really sets up how energetic and fun the rest of the game's music is gonna be. And it would even be brought back and partially remixed for Sonic Generations, which is pretty cool. The only other noteworthy thing about Leaf Forest is that you can unlock Cream after you finish it, which leads into the second zone, Hot Crater. This level is fine. Apart from having my favorite music track in the game, the level design here is mostly plain and forgettable again. There were these poles you can run past and spin on to gain even more speed. Maybe some of the hook things that launch you up are kinda cool, but that's pretty much all I can recall about what was unique about this level. Though Hot Shelter is where the bottomless pits really start popping up more. They are legitimately terrible and are sadly gonna keep getting worse as the game goes on. But things do kinda look up a bit with Zone 3, Music Plant. This zone is a huge fan favorite and it's easy to see why. There are some legitimately fun music-themed gimmicks here, like bouncing on piano keys, getting launched out of these trumpets, and a bunch of other instrument-based enemies and designs. And of course, the music here is fantastic as well. I would probably call Music Plant the most fun level in the game and probably the one zone I wouldn't mind replaying. You also unlock Tails here too, which is cool. And when it comes to Zone 4, Ice Paradise, it almost reaches that same level of fun in Music Plant, but for the most part, this level just kinda goes back to being fine, like the first two zones. I do love the snow aesthetic, and Act 1 has a fun Christmassy sounding music track, but again, you're mostly just holding right and jumping. Occasional loop-de-loop, having a spring or dash pad send you down the path the game wants you to go, just not too much going on. This level also feels weirdly closed in and claustrophobic for me to play. I don't really know how to describe it. but I don't think the linear structure here really benefits the level at all. It's supposed to be a snow level. Why not make it seem a bit more open than it is? I do love the penguin batniks though. They are insanely cute. Despite my issues, Ice Paradise is probably the last zone in the game I kind of enjoy. Because Zone 5 is, aw shit, Sky Canyon. Yep, we're at the zone where the game decides to just stop being fun. Every issue I've had with the previous zones is present, but made way worse with Sky Canyon's level design straight up killing you if you don't know how to use the trick move. I'm sorry, but this level's not fun to play. When it's not boring, it's just irritating. Good graphics and music can't redeem any of this crap. What doesn't help either is that this level can seriously drag, which is crazy because it's still featuring sections where you're most certainly moving fast, but that doesn't automatically mean you'll reach the end any faster either. How did they make levels that are supposed to be designed around moving super fast feel like they're taking forever? That's honestly impressive. Whatever, moving on to Zone 6, Techno Base, it doesn't really improve things. It does continue to include sections where you can die if you fail to use the trick move, but at the very least, if you made it this far, then you're now at least aware that the move exists, and can clue in better where you should probably use it. That still doesn't fix things, but at least the game's not killing you out of nowhere anymore. Another thing about this level, which you can probably notice just by looking at it, are all the crazy and colorful backgrounds. It still looks vibrant and impressive for the GBA to pull off, but I don't know, it could be a little too much to look at if you've maybe been stuck in the level for too long. I love the technological themes for this level, but Techno Base is still just kind of plain for me again, so Cybertrack this ain't. It's also another level that drags on a bit too long, and so does the next zone, Egg Utopia, the final regular zone with 2 acts, and fuck this shit. This zone has it all. Colorful graphics and great music, but bland level design that lasts way too long, a dozen grind rails that don't work very well, bottomless pits aplenty, and it just goes on and on and on. I'm not kidding when I say this. This is one of the most boring fucking final levels I've ever played in a Sonic game. It makes Scrap Brain look like Final Egg. I'd rather play Death Egg Mark II from Sonic 4, which debatably had just as bland, if not worse level design, but at least that zone was shorter. Fuck Egg Utopia, what a terrible final level. Before I get to the actual final zone, I'll segue right into the boss fights, and they're all kinda bad. And yet another example of a cool concept being poorly executed, which appears to be Advance 2's motto. Pretty much every single boss fight involves you constantly running and trying to jump at Eggman. Yep, just like the levels, all the boss fights can feel like you're playing the same shit over and over again. It can get really tedious, and losing in these boss fights is never fun, because then you have to replay a zone again. And I just don't like replaying the levels or boss fights, so it's like a double punishment for me. The only boss fight that kinda stuck out to me was the one in Sky Canyon, not because it's any good, because it's not, but when you're playing through the game as Sonic for the first time, Knuckles is the one you're fighting. So that boss fight is more interesting from a story perspective, but not so much gameplay. Really, the only times I enjoyed playing these boss fights was when I was Cream and Cheese, because Cheese can really eviscerate these bosses in seconds. And this carries over into the final zone, by the way, XX Zone, or Double X Zone, X2 Zone, because for some reason the start of this level involves a boss rush. This is the only advanced game that features a boss rush, and it's easy to see why. It's not fun, and it takes forever. At the very least, they do lower the hits on the previous bosses, but it's still not fun. The final boss itself is kinda average, which I guess means it's probably the best one. You just have to avoid being crushed by platforms coming out the ground, and just try to land a few hits on the giant robot, while also avoiding it shooting projectiles at you. In other words, just play as Cream and send Cheese at him over and over. You'll always win. Obviously, this isn't the true final boss, and the only way to get to the actual one is by going after the Chaos Emeralds. You did have to do the same thing in the previous games, so it should be a piece of cake. Right? Getting to the special stages in Sonic Advance 2 is one of the worst aspects of the game. Yes, even worse than killing the player in levels for not knowing the trick move. In every level, you can find these special rings to pick up, with each act having 7. And in order to access the special stages, then you have to collect all 7 special rings and then finish the level. A game where just about every level is designed around moving really fast and being as linear as possible, also expects you to wander around these stretched out locations in order to find these stupid rings. These levels are boring to run in and can be a huge drag to just stop and look around in too. And a lot of these special rings can be placed in really specific locations, so a guide is basically required to find them all. I'm noticing a conflict of interest. Do they want the levels to be sped through super fast? Or do they want weirdos like me to stop and look around like better games with better level layouts did better in the past? You can't just have your cake and eat it too, Advance 2! You fucked up! Not to mention, if you get all the special rings but lose the special stage, you have to go recollect all 7 rings again, just so you can get another chance at playing the special stages. That is so fucking tedious. Now, some of you watching might mention, well, what about collecting the Chow in Advance 3? Those could be just as obnoxious and cryptically hidden like the special rings in Advance 2. Well, Advance 3 benefits from 2 things. 1, better level design that actually lets you explore, and 2, when you pick up a Chow, you don't have to recollect them, and the game autosaves your progress. And I don't care who you are, that is a million times better. Advance 3 is better than Advance 2, deal with it. But when it comes to the special stages in Advance 2, especially after you understand how to play them, they're pretty lame. It has you running around in a, albeit pretty impressive 3D space, where you have to collect 300 rings. Oh yeah, the Zero Robot from Adventure 1's also here. That's cool. 300 rings is a lot, but you can often build up bonuses by collecting a lot of rings in great succession. But I think one issue I really have with these special stages are the controls. It just feels like ass. Needing to almost always hold forward all the time makes these special stages not very fun to play at all. Not like the special stages have been major highlights before, but I just found these kinda dull to play. And needing to do them over and over again didn't help matters either. It gets even worse later, trust me. So after you go through the annoying scavenger hunt of collecting every special ring, and play through the tedium of all 7 special stages, that means Sonic can access the final zone in the game. The true final boss takes place in True Area 53, the only part of the game where you can play as Super Sonic, and it's alright. It's another standard final boss in space kind of fight. You just have to knock Eggman's missiles back at him to damage him, while also keeping track of your ring count. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to say about this fight. It's probably the second best one, you know, behind the final boss in the Double X zone, but that's really it. And again, this is the only part of the game where you can play as Super Sonic, meaning you can't play as him in regular levels, but considering the time period this came out in, what else is new? Just beat the fight, save vanilla, and the game is over. So, what else does this game have when it comes to extra content? Well, this is actually another one of the worst handled aspects of the game. Not in terms of what the actual content is, but more how you go about unlocking everything. You may have noticed that there was something, or more, someone that was missing from Advance 2, and this is the part of the review where I once again need to ask, where is Amy? She was playable from the start in Advance 1, and you unlock her in Advance 3 pretty early on. So when you do finish the game, why doesn't she appear and why isn't she selectable anywhere? Well, she is still in the game and can be unlocked, but it's not from playing the story mode or even by getting the true ending. In order to unlock Amy, you have to collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds with every single character. Yeah, they don't share the emeralds between each other. So you gotta go collect all the special rings and play through all the special stages 4 times just to play as Amy. Why the hell did they do this? How do you mess up getting an unlockable character this badly? And a character that you can select and play as just fine in the previous game. And do you know how ungoddamn fair it is that the characters no longer share the emeralds between each other? What if you weren't trying to unlock Amy and you were just trying to get to the true ending? So you maybe decide to collect the special rings as Tails or Cream, since they both fly and can make exploring the levels a lot easier, only to discover you didn't even unlock the true final boss. This means you have to collect all the emeralds as Sonic just to get the final level. You can't use any other character to help you get there anymore. Needless to say, I did not want to go through the hassle of collecting every Chaos Emerald 4 times. I don't like Advance 2, and I don't care about it enough to do that. So I got a Codebreaker GBA device, and used cheats to unlock Amy and the final boss just to record footage. Fans of this game can give me shit for that, but Advance 2 shouldn't have handled these basic unlockables so horribly. Also, it was either I do this or no review. When it comes to Amy herself, she plays just fine. She's mostly a Sonic clone in this game, which can be both good and bad for some people, but overall, she should not have been locked behind this game in such a stupid fashion. As much as I love getting to play as Amy again, she is not worth the hassle of getting every Chaos Emerald multiple times just to play as her. That's dumb. This game is dumb. If you like this game, you are not dumb, but this game is still dumb. In terms of the other extra content, guess what, fucko? You can only unlock them by collecting the damn Chaos Emeralds! Suffice to say, if you were able to unlock Amy, you'll have everything. The tiny Chow Garden from Advance 1 returns, and it's about as okay as it was there, but you're only able to unlock it by collecting the Chaos Emeralds with at least one character. Really smart idea by making us have to unlock a basic extra that was easily accessible in the previous game. There's also the sound test, which now features Cream dancing along to the music, which is really cute. What's not cute is that you can't unlock the sound test unless you collect every Chaos Emerald with 2 characters. Cool. There's even a boss option / time attack mode, which is fine I guess if you maybe enjoyed the boss fights or whatever. But guess what? You can't even access this mode either unless you collect all the Chaos Emeralds with 3 characters! What is wrong with this game? Actually, the only mode that isn't locked behind these really stupid methods is, unsurprisingly, the multiplayer mode, which you can play with a single game pack, or via the link cable if you and a friend have your own copies of the game. I've never got a chance to play the multiplayer modes in the Advance games, but this one seems pretty similar to Advance 1's multiplayer mode, so I guess if you enjoyed playing it there, then it shouldn't be too bad here either. In conclusion, I don't like Advance 2. There's a reason I didn't want to tackle it 5 years ago. The graphics are terrific and the music is fantastic. I also love Cream and Vanilla, but Sonic Advance 2 is quite possibly one of my least favorite Sonic games to go back and play. The level designs are way too samey for me, with the last 3 zones just legitimately not being very good. I do love the new boost and trick modes, but the game executes them horribly, and straight up punishes the player if they don't know about the latter. I hate the special rings, the special stages are boring, and making most of the extra content, including Amy, locked behind needing to collect the Chaos Emeralds over and over again is not fun. Honestly, while none of the GBA games, apart from maybe Advance 3, didn't really have huge development cycles, I would say Advance 2 probably suffers the most from a lack of polish. Advance 1 did have a short development time, but it was almost graceful in comparison to how solid the game came out. I greatly prefer replaying Advance 1 anytime, but Advance 2, despite its faster paced levels, just had a lot of lackluster execution. Say what you will about Advance 3, that game absolutely improves several terrible aspects from Advance 2, and I adore it so much. I just really wish I could say the same about Advance 2. With that said, I do understand my disliking of Advance 2 obviously comes down to preference. There are plenty of Sonic fans out there, and most likely in the comments, who adore this game and consider it their favorite of the trilogy. I do kind of understand the idea of fans finding this game more thrilling and entertaining than Advance 1, and I also think this game's sense of speed and simplicity is probably what makes those fans hate the more experimental approach of Advance 3. Honestly, fans having differing viewpoints on which game in the trilogy they prefer just really makes me love how varied the Advance games can truly feel. Not all of them feel the exact same as one another apart from maybe graphics and music, and that's really cool. So while I may not like Advance 2 very much and consider it the worst in the trilogy, there are other people who think otherwise and really like this game. And hey, that's okay. Advance 2 is still dumb though. Regardless of my feelings on the game, if you want to go out and play Advance 2, the best option you have right now is just finding the original cartridge and playing it on your GBA, or backwards compatible DS, or emulation. Advance 2 did see a port on the Wii U Virtual Console in February 2016, but it was only in Japan and it got delisted recently, just like every other game on the Wii U eShop. So have fun modding! I've probably said this in every Sonic GBA video I've ever made so far, but man, I really hope we see the Advance Trilogy and Battle get ported at some point. Now that Nintendo has that GBA app on Switch, I really hope Sega decides to put these classic handheld titles on the service. It would be so much fun getting to play these games on a portable console again, along with playing the multiplayer modes online with friends. That would be so cool. If that doesn't happen, then I hope Sega at least includes the games on another Sonic game collection. Maybe it could be done in a similar vein to Gems collection, where it includes all these obscure titles in the series like the Advance games and Battle. It would be easy money for them, but they have yet to do this. Seriously, if Castlevania can do an Advance collection, why can't Sonic? What's the holdup? I think that's pretty much all I have to say. Feels nice making a shorter video nowadays, and sorry again that this review took 5 years to finally happen, but I hope you guys enjoyed the review. And if you're watching this in a GBA compilation video, then I hope you enjoy the rest of the reviews too, even though some of them were made a few years apart. Like, the Advance 1 and 3 reviews were made back in 2019 before the GBA app on Switch even existed, and also before COVID. Sonic Pinball Party is quite possibly the greatest Sonic game ever made. Released in 2003 as a direct sequel to Sonic Spinball on the Genesis, since it came out almost exactly 10 years later, Sonic Pinball Party was developed by Sonic Team. It was also co-developed by none other than
Jupiter!
That's right. I bet you never thought a whole planet would ever help create a Sonic game. And not just any planet, but the biggest planet in our Milky Way galaxy. So eat that, atheists. Or should I say, Mario fans? So the main appeal of Sonic Pinball Party is that it's a pinball game. Duh. What are you, stupid? It's in the fucking title, you fucking simpleton. There's an arcade mode where you can play on 3 different tables that have special Sega themes. One for Sonic the Hedgehog, one for Nights into Dreams, and one for Samade Amigo. I know what some of you may be thinking, but aside from different visuals and slightly different layouts, what exactly is the major difference between these 3 tables? Only one of them isn't based on a franchise that's been dead for over a decade. But we don't just have an arcade mode. We also have a story mode. The story here is super cool and very involving, so eat your heart out, Sonic Battle. The story mode involves you playing as Sonic, and you have to fight off Knuckles, Tails, Amy, and Metal Sonic. And after defeating Metal, you'll unlock a bonus challenger, Dr. Eggman. I couldn't beat the story mode. It's a bit too godlike to me. AKA I'm really bad at pinball. The furthest I got in story mode was Tails, who looks like a fucking creepypasta for some reason. He has hyper-realistic blood red eyes. Scary shit. Other modes in the game include a party mode, where you can play hot potato, hockey, and ladder climb. So I couldn't play either of these games. You need to use the fucking link cable and also have another GBA. Another mode is Casinopolis. Hell yeah, I love that level from Sonic Adventure. Here you can play roulette, slots, and bingo. Sick. By the way, you can only unlock these options by playing through the story mode further enough. But thankfully, the copy I got off eBay had it all unlocked. However, I still deleted the story file on it like a goddamned idiot. Fuck me. But hey, if you're a fucking idiot like me, then you can go to the lesson mode for babies. This mode will give you a rundown of the pinball table and how they work, all being told to you by Omochow. Yeah, everyone's favorite Sonic character. Another reason why Sonic Pinball Party is amazing is because of the soundtrack. Most of the soundtrack is made up of some pretty excellent GBA remixes of Sonic tracks from the franchise, along with a few more remixes from other Sega brands. A bunch of the music is actually reused from Sonic Advance 1, but it also includes a few rearrangements from that game too. Okay, being completely unironic, some of these remixes actually sound really fucking rad, especially for the GBA. There's some great remixes of Supersonic Racing from Sonic R, Open Your Heart from Sonic Adventure, Knights has a cool remix too, and a few more. Seriously, if you're a Sega fan, then go check out this game's soundtrack. It's great. And that's basically all the main content for Sonic Pinball Party. But there's actually one final mode in the game, the Tiny Chow Garden from Sonic Advance 1 and 2. Since I already explained the Tiny Chow Garden a fair bit in my Advance 1 review, I'll summarize it here by saying it's basically a condensed version of the Chow Garden from the adventure games. Meaning, while it's not as expansive as those games, it's still a neat little distraction. Interestingly enough, Sonic Pinball Party would end up being the last original game in the series to feature the Chow Garden in some capacity, since it came out after Sonic Adventure 2 and SA2 Battle, and while SADX did release shortly after Pinball Party, it was really just a port of SA1, which was already a 5-year-old game at that point. And strangely enough, the Tiny Chow Garden wasn't included in Sonic Battle or Sonic Advance 3, so by all means, this is the last game in the Sonic franchise to include this beloved feature. Huh. Oh my god, Sonic Pinball Party killed the Chow Garden. Anyways, hopefully this review has convinced you all that Sonic Pinball Party is not just the greatest pinball game ever made, but it's also probably the greatest Sonic game ever made. Unfortunately, at the time of this review, the game has not been ported anywhere, but copies of it can be relatively cheap, around $20 to $30 on sites like eBay. Did you know? There were also special combo packs for Sonic Pinball Party where it was released alongside another GBA game. One of them included being packed in with Sonic Advance 1. So if you guys get this combo pack, that means you'll get one of the greatest Sonic titles ever made, and Sonic Advance. There were also 2 other combo packs, but released in Europe only. One of them had the game packed in with Sonic Battle, which is neat, while the other one had it paired with Column's Crown. Yeah, Column's Crown. You guys remember that GBA classic, right? What the fuck is Column's Crown? So yeah, go out and play Sonic Party Pinball Land. Truly one of the greatest Sonic games ever made. It's got tons of fun for the whole family. I've got a headache, I'm going to bed, Jesus. Sonic Battle is easily one of the most fascinating Sonic games out there. I have no real memories attached to this game, apart from trying to play it on an emulator for the first time back in 2014 or 2013. In terms of development history, there's not a lot of info. However, while Dimps were usually the ones who made the handheld games at the time, more specifically the Advanced Trilogy, Sonic Battle is credited to Sonic Team. I'm gonna assume this was handled by the Japan team, since Sonic Team USA was kinda busy crunching on Sonic Heroes. Apart from this, I literally can't find anything else about Battle's development, but there is some concept art. One of them shows what I'm assuming is an early title for the game, Sonic Battle Stadium, which I've never seen before and it looks pretty interesting. Aside from that, Sonic Retro's development page also included these sketches of Amy and early pieces of official artwork for Sonic and Shadow. They look very Sega Saturn here, especially with Sonic having a spine sticking up. It's pretty cool seeing Sonic Battle's art style slowly taking shape here. I'll say this now, but I love Sonic Battle's official artwork. It looks so badass and cool. It's very comic booky, especially if you look at the Japanese box art. I also like comparing the cover arts for Sonic Battle and Mario Strikers, mainly since they look so similar to each other. It's pretty sick. The game would first be shown off at E3 2003, and that's kind of all I have to discuss. Seeing how this can be one of the more obscure Sonic games for people, I really wish there was more development info I could talk about. Hell, even on the cutting room floor page for Sonic Battle, it only really features unused dialogue boxes as cut content since, spoiler alert, Sonic Battle has a heavy amount of dialogue in its story mode. I guess it should be noted that Sonic Battle was the second time the series got a fighting game, the first one being the arcade classic, Sonic the Fighters, originally released in 1996. I'm not a fighting game person, but Fighters was a wacky and fun little game with a lot of charm to it. It's also gotten a decent following over the years, especially due to the fact that it was ported on Gems Collection, and the HD port you can get on Xbox and PS3. Kinda wish it came to Steam though. It especially gets more points when it comes to the inclusion of some very obscure and even forgotten characters like Fang, Bark, Bean, and the oh-so-lovable Honey the Cat. That's not sarcasm, I legitimately love her design. And the HD port would even let her be playable if you hover over Amy and press the start button. I think it's adorable, especially when you consider that her and Amy were besties in the comics back then, which is awesome. But anyways, Fighters was back in the classic era, so making another Sonic-based fighting game around the early 2000s made a lot of sense. It was also a really good idea considering how expanded the Sonic cast had gotten by that point. Sonic Battle was intended to be released side by side with Sonic Heroes, which ended up happening in December 2003 for Japan. Sorta. For whatever reason, despite the games releasing side by side in other regions, Japan received Sonic Battle much earlier on December 4th, and didn't get Sonic Heroes until December 30th. What the hell? At first glance, this isn't really a major issue, but this can actually kinda mess with the continuity when you're playing through the story. I'll address this later, but anyone familiar with the game should know exactly what I'm referring to. As a kid, I always found it a bit interesting that the title and the logo for the game appear to be taken from the GameCube port of SA2, which was Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. I'm not sure if there's any other connections with these two games, aside from obvious story points, but to my knowledge, SA2 Battle and Sonic Battle don't seem to share any kind of features or compatibility if you try connecting both using the GameCube link cables. Just like the other Advanced games, despite having a Game Boy SP growing up, I never got a chance to play any of the Sonic games on the handheld. Like I said earlier, I first played the game on an emulator as a teen. I thought the game looked pretty sick, but I didn't get very far in the story. While I personally don't have any attachment attachment to this game. One of my cousins, Andrew, told me he apparently had this game growing up. Andrew isn't a Sonic fan, the games just aren't really his thing. Though he did try out Sonic Mania and he really enjoyed it. But in terms of other Sonic games, he told me at one point that he did have Sonic Battle while growing up and thought it was a lot of fun. I just thought that would be interesting to share. So I guess if this review's for anyone, it's for Andrew, if he's even watching. Jumping right into the game, this is easily one of the most hefty stories ever written for a Sonic game, and the majority of it is told through text. The writer, or more so the story mode planner, was Asahiko Kiku. To my knowledge, he hasn't written or worked on the story for any other game in the series. The only other credits he'd get for the franchise would be for doing the level design in Shadow the Hedgehog. He also worked on the Night sequel on Wii, Journey of Dreams, but I never played it. The story mode consists of 8 character episodes, but unlike the adventure games where those game stories were following the same plot, just being retold from each character or site's perspective, the story mode in Sonic Battle, apart from a few flashbacks, is actually ongoing, having each episode pick up right where the other one left off. So the plot starts with Sonic's episode, opening with Dr. Eggman in his base working on a new robot of sorts, but is refusing to listen to what he says, so he decides to just dump the robot on a nearby beach. The robot is apparently known as a Gizoid, pronouncing it with a G because there's no way it sounds right with a J, and the Gizoid ends up being discovered by Sonic. Sonic realizes the robot doesn't really know where it is and only seems to speak in ellipses, so he decides to take it to Tails' house. By the way, in this game, Tails has both a house and a lab in the same vicinity. Okay, is Foxboy rich or something? Anyways, as Sonic is taking the robot back to Tails, he ends up bumping into Shadow? Okay, this needs to be addressed. Remember how Sonic Battle and Sonic Heroes were supposed to be released side by side everywhere, but for some reason Japan got it a few weeks early? Well, Battle is supposed to take place after the events of Heroes, so that's why Shadow's back and acting like normal, along with the fact that no one else is surprised that he's back even though he died in SA2. Shadow, by the way, is the first character you end up fighting. I'm not talking about the gameplay yet, but Shadow is like one of the strongest characters in the game, so having this be the first fight is pretty intense. It turns out both Shadow and even Rouge are trying to track down the Gizoid, who we learn is named Emerald. By the way, I'm pronouncing his name Emerald as a play on the word emerald, because I think it's cute and probably what the developers had in mind. Though according to a friend of mine, the Jazzy Man, he tried to argue that his name isn't pronounced Emerald, but apparently Emerald. Yeah, I don't get it either. Literally any other person I've talked to mentioned this character always calls him Emerald, so it doesn't matter. Also, remember the other Gizoid in Sonic Advance 3? His name was Gemerald. Get it? It's a play on the words gem and emerald? It's simple and clever. Well, not to Jazzy though. He also tried to claim that that character is actually meant to be called G-Merle. No, I'm sorry Jazzy, but that sounds stupid. And being real, I think he'd probably prefer to call the character Emerald over what the English dub of Sonic X called him, which was Amel, mainly because they mistranslated the character's name. So way to go, 4Kids. With that said, go check out David Get Keen on Steam. Wishlist it now, it looks sick. Back to battle. After the encounter with Shadow, Sonic brings Emerald back to Tails and try to figure out what this robot's all about, and why the other characters are trying to track him down. They eventually realize that Emerald is capable of copying other characters' moves, and can also grow stronger after collecting a Chaos Emerald. At the same time, Eggman decides to send out his own Gizoid replicas, known as Phis. When I was younger, I straight up thought he called them Phils, and he sends them to go rob some jewelry stores and such, along with Sonic and company having to fight them. A lot. Like, a fuck ton of lot. Not only are the Phis out there causing trouble, but there's also Gamma? What? Didn't he literally die in Adventure 1? Well, it turns out these are just replica copies of Gamma. You know, kinda similar to the ones that also appeared in Adventure 2. The game even makes a point of having the characters recognize and name drop Gamma, but also has them realize it's not actually him, just a different model entirely. These are called the Chaos Gammas, and just like the Phi Gizoids, you end up fighting them several times. Okay, so while Eggman's robots are out causing a ruckus, Sonic and Tails are trying to figure out more about Emerald, and decide to take him to see Knuckles in order to give him one of his Chaos Emeralds. However, Knuckles mistakes Emerald for being one of Eggman's robots that robbed the jewelry store earlier, so they end up fighting. After battling Knuckles twice, he gives in and lets Sonic and Tails give the Chaos Emerald to Emerald. Give the Chaos Emerald to Emerald. Try saying that 5 times fast. Which leads to Emerald uttering his first words. Much to the shock of Sonic and Tails, which is where Sonic's episode ends. Next is the Tails episode. As Sonic is training Emerald, Tails decides he's going to figure out more about Emerald's history. After getting access to the Central Lab in Central City, he finds out that Emerald is a Gizoid, which is a robot that was built in the ancient ruins, along with uncovering some restricted information from the lab that reveals that Professor Gerald Robotnik, Eggman's grandfather, also performed some experiments on Emerald a long time ago, close to the time he was working on Shadow. But once Tails uncovers this information, the security bots at the Central Lab activate, which are just gray gammas, and it leads to Tails and Emerald needing to battle them. Twice, oh for the love of God. So I'd usually save talking about the gameplay for after talking about the story, but Sonic Battle kinda complicates things for me since I feel like 75% of the time, you're just reading a bunch of text boxes. This is definitely a story-focused Sonic game. So for the Sonic fans who watch my stuff and claim they only care about the gameplay and not the story, Sonic Battle kinda gives those fans the middle finger because the gameplay is not really that special. I will say first and foremost, I'm not really a fighting game expert, so I'm probably the least qualified person to discuss this genre, but just talking about the gameplay from my own experience, and probably the most impressive part of the game, Sonic Battle is not a 2D fighting game. It actually has you fighting in these 3D battle arenas, which look really incredible for the Game Boy Advance, and I didn't notice any slowdown or glitchy graphics anywhere, so this aspect got pulled off insanely well. You can move around freely in this 3D space, and while the perspective can sometimes get in the way of fighting, I personally never had too many issues landing hits on enemies. For the basic controls, you press B to punch, and you can usually button mash to use different combos by tapping a direction on the D-pad. You can also press the R button to use a special attack, which can be crucial for beating fights, at least if you're an inexperienced fighting game player like me. You can also heal your character by holding the L button. How fast you can heal depends on the character. However, healing can also help you charge a meter above your health bar. Once that meter's filled, your character starts glowing, and when you land a special attack, you'll instantly kill the other characters. That is fucking awesome. So the basic fighting mechanics are fine, but the ground movement is actually a lot better than I was expecting. Using the D-pad in a 3D space isn't too bad, but I'd highly recommend playing this game with an analog stick because it controls pretty well. More specifically, play this game on the GameCube's Game Boy player with a GameCube controller. It feels perfect. It's almost like they built the game around using it. Also, I'm not sure if this was a feature from the Game Boy player itself, or the GBA interface software I used to record footage, but the Y button on the controller can be used as a turbo button, so you can hold that and use rapid attacks, or a dash move that every character has. It's really convenient and sick. So, the gameplay is pretty solid and impressive for a handheld title back in 2003. So, what's the issue? Well, apart from the battle arenas looking different and varied, this is kind of all the gameplay has to offer. It wouldn't be too bad, but Sonic Battle is way too big on having you repeat the same fights over and over again with no major changes. That is the biggest problem with Sonic Battle. The gameplay and story mode is repetitive as hell. Far too many times does it make you fight the same two robot enemies at different points in several stories, but it even has you fight those same enemies immediately afterward too. So more often or not, the game just plays out like, oh, you fought another Phi/Gamma robot? Well, why don't you fight him again, but now there's two of them? Or, oh, you fought this character and had to knock them out 5 times? Well, do it again, but now you have to knock them out 10 times! The way the game is structured isn't fun, and it can make the story mode drag on way too much. And as the episodes go on, the fights just get progressively more difficult. It can even reach a point where you'll probably spend an assload of time stuck on a really hard as hell fight because maybe you suck at fighting games like me. Seriously, the CPUs can be brutally unfair. Like, remember the special attack you can charge up and instantly kill characters with? Well, the CPUs can use that too, and it can be really irritating. Another issue, and this is more than likely because of the tiny Game Boy Advance screen, but why can't I see the other characters' health bars? It kinda sorta makes the fights more difficult for me when I'm not sure when the character I'm fighting is gonna die. One exploit I often used, which I discovered by accident when live streaming the game a few years ago, was that I would just mash the R button over and over again, which usually helped me win most of the fights by simply spamming, but that's obviously not fun either. This exploit only got me so far because not every character has special moves that you can abuse, so I hate to break this to any Sonic battlers watching, but I once again had to use a codebreaker device to finish the game. Again, I'll be the first to say I suck at fighting games, and I didn't feel too good about cheating, but with the way the game's laid out, it was taking way too long for me to finish. The main cheat I used was winning fights by pressing select, which was pretty helpful mainly when it came to skipping those really stupid repeat fights, because being honest, I really don't feel like playing those again. Another aspect about this game is that you can play as Emerald, who starts out playing horribly, but the main gimmick with him is that after fights he can collect these character cards, which can help him learn new moves and improve his gameplay. Yeah, you can customize Emerald by using these cards. It's a pretty great concept, though it's kinda made more tedious by this game's insanely repetitive and dragged out gameplay. You probably won't reach a decently playable Emerald until around probably Knuckles episode, which at that point you're halfway through the game. So overall, the gameplay for Sonic Battle, on its own, can be a lot of fun at first, but the way the story mode handled it was really underwhelming. Yeah, I'm just getting the gameplay out the way now so I can focus on the rest of the story without needing to stop, but I will say this, when playing with the right people, I'm sure the multiplayer for this game must be loads of fun. I know Johnny said in his Sonic spin-offs video that there was no way people were using their GBA link cables for anything other than Pokemon, but Johnny, shut the fuck up. Multiplayer Sonic Battle I'm sure has to be a lot of fun with friends, especially if you're able to master the mechanics and everything. I hope to experience it someday. Put it on Switch, cowards! Getting back to the story, remember how Tails learned that Gerald Robotnik did experiments on Emerald? Well, it turns out Shadow was going after Emerald to destroy him before the Gizloid collects all the Chaos Emeralds and reaches his true power, which is why Shadow usually appears in most of the episodes. Oh, and Rouge? Well, she goes after Emerald after learning that Eggman's going after him too, but she discovers that the robot already made a link with Sonic. This means Emerald can only listen to Sonic's commands, and won't obey anyone else until Sonic himself tells him to. So through some pretty clever dialogue, Rouge tricks Sonic into letting Emerald follow her commands. Despite noticing a few typos, I actually really enjoy the writing in this game. It kept me invested and often had me chuckling over the character interactions, with Rouge tricking Sonic easily being one of my favorite moments. It even leads to a funny bit where Sonic teases Knuckles by telling Emerald to never listen to him. What a bitch. So we know why Shadow's initially going after Emerald, but what does Rouge want him for? Well, in the third episode, which is Rouge's, we find out it's because she just wants to train Emerald to help her rob jewelry stores. I mean, she is a thief. What else were you expecting? Just like with Tails, Rouge has her own place in this game where she can train Emerald, known as Club Rouge, which is probably one of my favorite battle arenas in the game. I love the pinball stuff here, even though you can't really interact with any of it. Oh yeah, Rouge's episode is also where Amy appears for the first time, and Amy. Well, when she first shows up, she hears about how Sonic has been training this robot he found, and she interprets this as Sonic training to be a dad, so she decides to take the role of being Emerald's mother, even asking him to call her that, so she could try to impress Sonic and raise Emerald as their baby. This somehow gets stranger later. So after Rouge takes Emerald, Amy tries to go after her to stop her from whatever she has planned, even leading to a fucking annoying battle where she loses horribly, and then a second fight happens where she and a vision of Sonic appears to help, and the Sonic CPU is really brutal. It's a terrible fight. Why did the game make me play this? But eventually Rouge discovers that Emerald has a good heart and isn't really fit for a jewel thief, so she just returns him to Sonic. That's literally how her episode ends. I gotta say, I really hated the fight with Amy, but I kinda like how, in context, Amy explained to Emerald that she's basically his mom, and then later on Rouge basically makes Emerald fight his mother, which is pretty outlandish when you really think about it. It's probably one of the game's best unintentional laugh out loud moments. The fourth episode is for Knuckles, and by this point of the game, Emerald has learned quite a lot, to a point where he's now speaking in full sentences, talking and behaving mostly like Sonic. Since Knuckles is aware of how powerful Emerald's becoming, he decides to try training him too. They end up getting ambushed a few times by Eggman's Phi Gizoids, but in the process, they discover that shards of the emeralds are inside the Phis, so they collect enough of them and take them back to Tails, who can use the shards to create another emerald, which he, of course, gives the Emerald. So at this point in the game, he now has 3 of the 7 Chaos Emeralds. Oh, and one kind of funny detail here is that for some reason in every cutscene, when Emerald gets a Chaos Emerald, they're always green. I don't know if this was just an oversight, or maybe they just didn't think Sonic fans would be weird enough to catch this detail. Plus, all the emeralds being green here kinda reminds me of how they were all blue in Sonic Spinball. I think there was also 16 of them in that game, kinda like how there were 8 of them in Sonic the Fighters. Anyways, after Knuckles' episode, it's Amy's turn. And while I have enjoyed the story and the way the characters were written so far, Amy is probably the one character that just feels off. We already saw it earlier by how she decides to be this protective mother figure for Emerald, treating it as if she and Sonic have a baby, which personally I didn't mind at first. Remember, she did want to marry Sonic in Heroes, and since Battle is supposed to take place afterward, I'm guessing this was supposed to be an expansion on that. However, my main issue with Amy in Battle is she's weirdly mean. Her dialogue can come off extremely aggressive at points. It just feels strange. Amy's episode is also where we first get to see Cream and Cheese, and she's even being mean to them too, along with forcing both of them to fight her and Emerald in a training exercise she calls boxercise. It's weird enough, but then the game explains that she's doing these boxercise workouts to lose weight and improve her figure? When the hell did Amy ever care about her body? And why the fuck is she being so mean to Cream? What did Cream do? And where the hell is Vanilla? Oh, remember how Tails had his own house and Rouge has her own nightclub? Well, Amy has her own apartment. Yes, she has her own place. And Cream appears to be living with her too. Once again, where is your mother? As weird as the boxercise plot is, I do like the aesthetic of Amy's room. The pink is really nice and I love the Sonic rug. It's cute. Regardless, Amy's writing is still weird and sorta just ends with Emerald realizing Cream is a far better friend to have. Made even more apparent by how Cream's episode happens right afterward. Cream's episode is a bit more basic, but her place here is actually pretty vital for Emerald's character development. Cream pretty much teaches Emerald to understand emotions like being sad, and it's kinda heartfelt to watch. In my Advanced 2 review, I commented about how Cream is one of my favorite characters, and seeing her be the one to teach Emerald about emotions is really awesome. Plus, her fighting style has Cheese assisting her like in the other games, which is a lot of fun. Oh, and there was one bit during the episode where Cream asked one of the Gamma robots, "What are you fighting for?" And it just made me burst out laughing.
What am I fighting for?
The second to last episode is with Shadow, and this is probably where I found the plot to be the most interesting. It helps expand on Shadow's backstory with Professor Gerald, and how both he and Emerald were experimented on around the same time. Plus, I would probably say Shadow's the best character to play as. His moves and powers are really satisfying to use, though the one detriment to him is that he heals really slow. What the hell, I thought he was supposed to be the ultimate life form. Why is it taking so long for him to charge up? So Shadow tracks down Emerald, no longer wanting to destroy him, but wants to figure out why both of them were made, being weapons of war as he puts it. By this point of the story, Emerald has 6 of the Chaos Emeralds, and the last one is with Shadow, but he refuses to part with it not only because of his fears of Emerald reaching his full power, but also because a part of Maria lies with him and the Chaos Emerald. Yeah, this game is supposed to take place after Heroes and before the Shadow game, and at this point, Shadow appears to already know who Maria and Professor Gerald are, along with being fully aware of who he appears to be, and why Maria is such an important figure in his life. Rouge even drops by later and tells Shadow about how he was Gerald's ultimate weapon, the ultimate life form. This exact scenario is something I complained about both Heroes and the Shadow game for never doing, but here's Sonic Battle coming along and playing out the scenario like it's no big deal. Fucking what even is the continuity for this series anymore? Thanks, Izuka. Anyway, Shadow and Emerald head to Eggman's base, which is called Gimme Shelter, how do you even pronounce it? And upon learning that both of them were made to help bring hope to humanity, Shadow decides to give his Chaos Emerald to Emerald. This shocks Rouge, but he tells her that he's okay with this because he will always be with Maria, so he doesn't need the Chaos Emerald. It's a pretty touching moment and a great highlight for Shadow's character. Fuck you, dude. After activating Emerald's true power, Shadow decides to challenge Emerald to a fight in order to see who between the two is the most powerful. This was a really fun scenario, and it's probably my favorite battle in the game. Not to mention, with the advent of that Sonic X Shadow Generation short Dark Beginnings, which reveals that Shadow and Emerald actually fought each other decades prior, it adds a bit more backstory to their fight and battle. Also, seeing Emerald pop up again in new Sonic media is pretty crazy. Like, I seriously made this review at the right time. As great as this fight is, sadly that's not where Shadow's episode ends, since he makes Emerald go fight the other characters too, which while I do understand needing to have him do this from a story perspective, it just once again makes the gameplay far more repetitive like before. But the 8th and last episode is for Emerald. Dr. Eggman, frustrated that his Phi Gizzoids and Chaos Gammas failed him, hasn't given up on his plans for world domination. Sonic and company find out that Eggman built a new Death Egg, wouldn't this be Mark III or some shit? And he also has a weapon on board called the Final Egg Blaster, which he plans on using to take over the world. Tails takes Sonic and Emerald to the Holy Summit in order to use a transporter he built, but when they arrive, Knuckles explains explains that the reappearance of the Death Egg caused a river near the top of the summit to freeze over. And not only that, but Chaos reawakened? Yes, the actual Chaos! Unless this is a copy or something, then would that make this Chaos? He doesn't actually have any involvement with the story itself, aside from needing to beat him in order to access the Death Egg. He's one of the strongest enemies to fight, but he's also really slow, so you can thankfully use that to your advantage in the fight. Well, Tails activates his transporter, and Emerald gets sent to the Death Egg to face off against Eggman. Twice. God damn it, Sonic Battle, not again. But after defeating Eggman, he fakes surrender in order to distract Emerald. The Doctor, while being in the presence of the final Egg Blaster device, manages to create a link with Emerald, meaning Eggman finally gained control of Emerald like he was plotting to the entire game. Except, no. In a sudden turn of events, Emerald completely changes into the very weapon of war that Shadow feared, completely overpowering Eggman and taking control of the final Egg Blaster, aiming it right at Earth. The other characters see this from afar, and Sonic decides to be sent up to the Death Egg in order to snap Emerald out of it. However, this doesn't work. So without any better solution, Sonic decides to fight Emerald in order to save the world, which leads to the true final boss, where you're shockingly not Super Sonic, but then again I guess it's a role reversal because Emerald's the one who has all the Chaos Emeralds. And this might be my second favorite fight in the game, right behind the one with Shadow and Emerald from the previous episode. There are two major reasons I love this fight, the first being from a story perspective. Seeing Emerald get overpowered and turn on everyone is pretty heartbreaking, especially if you enjoyed watching his development in every episode. The other reason I love this fight is mainly from a gameplay perspective. Like, throughout the campaigns, you're collecting a bunch of these character cards, and progressively using them to improve Emerald's fighting style, and just overall making him stronger and better. So to have the game end with you as Sonic having to fight the very robot that you helped improve and make more powerful, it's incredibly clever and also pretty goddamn terrifying if you think about it. It's sad and tragic. But at the same time, it's a very effective and well executed final boss, and it might honestly be one of my all-time favorites in the series. Oh, and the best part? You only have to fight Emerald once. Thank God. So upon defeating Emerald, he snaps out of his destructive behavior but is very badly damaged from the fight. Then, in probably one of the darkest endings in the series, Emerald recognizes that he's damaged beyond repair and begins counting down, eventually self-destructing. Yeah, Emerald doesn't make it. He dies. Even sadder, before he goes, he bids farewell to everyone he's ever met, even still calling Amy his mom. Okay, as weird as that part of the plot was, that detail is still really sad. It's an incredibly downer ending for the game, but I kinda respect that Sonic Battle had the guts to do this. It even attempts to deliver a pretty serious message about no longer needing weapons or wars, and then maybe the world could finally be peaceful someday. Okay, it's still trying to deliver all this in text with a bunch of cartoon animal characters, but I'm not saying it's perfect. I just respect that they did this in a Sonic game is all. Despite Emerald's death, there is a bit of hope at the very end. While everyone is devastated that Emerald's gone, Sonic says they shouldn't fret because an Emerald Shard ends up being found, meaning a piece of Emerald can still live on. This pretty much sets up the future character, Gemerald, who would later appear in Sonic Advance 3. And unlike Emerald, Gemerald would receive a much happier ending, getting to live in peace with Cream and Vanilla. How sweet. Seriously, where the hell was Vanilla during this whole mess? And that was the story and overall experience of Sonic Battle. Repetitive gameplay aside, it's honestly a really fun journey. If you guys love the adventure era characterization, Battle delivers it really well here. You know, with the exception of Amy's weird crap. This game gave me a lot of funny and even cathartic character moments, some interactions that I'll always remember, and a cool new character with an arc and ending that'll always stick with me. The prospect of war and world peace are pretty major and heavy topics for a Sonic game to tackle, but at the same time, it's a nice follow-up to some of the darker themes in Adventure 2, and Battle doesn't go too overboard with it either. The sad but hopeful ending is also just really nice foreshadowing to Sonic Advance 3, which is my favorite Advance game. I really adore that while Battle technically isn't an Advance game, it still has close connections to the trilogy. In a way, it almost makes the handheld trilogy a tetralogy if you're looking at this from a story perspective. Another cute detail with Sonic Battle are the voice clips. This game features the Adventure/Heroes era voice cast, and you mostly hear the character voices during the battle arenas, but on several occasions, the dialogue boxes can feature the characters uttering random phrases, and I just think that's really charming. This was probably my favorite voice cast in the entire franchise, so hearing them talk throughout the game is a lot of fun, along with being pretty impressive for the GBA sound capabilities, which would also be carried over to Advance 3.
Here I come!
Hi!
Battle is also one of the few other times we get to hear William Corkery as Tails, and Sarah Woolfolk as Cream, at least when it comes to hearing their voices outside of Heroes. And this might just be my favorite vocal performance of Rouge from Lani Minella. I feel like she really captured the vibe of Rouge perfectly in these voice clips. I seriously can't get enough of it.
Hi, sugar.
I think these were likely recorded around the same time everyone was doing their lines for Sonic Heroes, but one thing I found kinda cool is that John St. John is also in the game, but he's not voicing Big or Omega. Instead, he's voicing Gamma. Yeah, I'm guessing Lani Minella felt his voice was a pretty good substitute, considering Gamma's original voice actor Steve Brody sadly passed away 2 years before this game. I think it was a great choice too, just sounding like a neat variation of John's Omega voice.
Initiating recovery mode.
So, funny story, the first time I met Ryan Drummond, who was the voice of Sonic during this era of games, it was at Sonic Revolution 2019. I had him sign a bunch of games that I brought with me, which included my copies of Sonic Battle and Advance 3 since he did voice Sonic in those games, but I didn't have the boxes for either game at the time, so I just had him sign the tiny GBA carts. He didn't mind, he was pretty cool about it. Oh yeah, I even got him to sign my copies of Blue Stinger and Sonic Shuffle at Sonic Revolution 2024. Just felt like sharing that. I was pretty happy that he remembered Blue Stinger. It's such an obscure little Dreamcast launch title that I only really know about because of Oni Plays. So thank you, Ding Dong. The voice clip sounding so good also kinda highlights how great I think this game's soundtrack is too. Seriously, Sonic Battle might just have one of my all-time favorite Sonic soundtracks ever. It's probably the most heavy metal soundtrack in the series, and it's on a damn Game Boy Advance game. Seriously, just from the opening menus, this game's soundtrack is fucking fire. It has a fantastic variety too. The towns you walk around in can have some pretty catchy and relaxing music, while the battle arenas can have some pretty intense and kick-ass songs in them. Even some levels like Club Rouge and the Holy Summit Crater can sound funky as hell. Here's a few samples. I'd even go as far to say the music in the Death Egg and the final boss theme could easily be used in a regular Sonic platform game. Both of them would fit amazingly. Hell, the soundtrack is so good that one of the missions in Sonic Generations would feature an awesome remix of Emerald Beach, which was done by one of Sonic Battle's original composers, Kenichi Tokoi. That's really fucking cool, and it's easily one of the best remixes in Generations. Seriously, Sonic Battle has a fantastic soundtrack. There's so much here for me to just love. Remember the praises I gave to this game for its connections with Advance 3? Well, the music even does that too. The game's second staff roll music, which you hear at the end of Emerald's episode, sounds so similar to the staff roll that would later appear in Advance 3. It's almost like a precursor to it. So as Sonic Advance 3's biggest defender, I just love this connection so much. And it was pretty great foreshadowing if you think about it. So, look, if you can't stomach playing through this whole game, give the music a listen on its own. It is terrific and I can't praise it enough. In terms of extra content, there's obviously the multiplayer mode that I alluded to earlier. I've never really played it for myself, but I imagine it has to be a lot of fun if you're capable of getting a session going. You can fight in just about every battle arena in the story mode, and to make things cooler, after you finish Emerald's story, you can unlock Chaos as a playable character, and you unlock an extra battle arena. And guess what? It's Green Hill Zone, which I don't mind. Like, come on, considering the time this game came out, it was still pretty cute to do this. And it was long before this level got overused to hell like in the future games. It also kinda reminds me of when Adventure 2 had this level as well. We even get a kick fucking ass remix of Green Hill too. It sounds so sick. And good on Nakamura-san for receiving a royalty check. In terms of other extras, there's a training mode for newbies like me who suck at this game. There's also a challenge mode where you can choose a character and fight everyone else in different pairings. It's pretty cool. As you complete the episodes, you can unlock some mini games that you can play by linking the game with another GBA. These are pretty decent time wasters, but I didn't really check them out for too long. I do like how the Minehunt minigame is just Minesweeper but with Knuckles. Plus, Radical Highway makes an appearance in the minigame Speed Demon, which is cute. The game also lets you replay the character stories from start to finish, and doing so will give you access to reading one of Gerald Robotnik's journals. So I guess if you really like Sonic Battle's story and wanted a bit more lore, then there you go. Though you could just look up the journals on the Sonic Wiki if you really wanted to read them. So, I guess one thing I'll mention is that in Emerald's episode, you can visit the Sonic Team building and input certain passwords, which can help you unlock certain rare character cards. It's pretty cool, but there's not much else to really say. You could also just look up the passwords online and just unlock everything that way. But I did want to point out a very interesting fun fact about these passwords. A few years ago, the late streamer Etika claimed that he actually got his username from one of these passwords in Sonic Battle. This was the Akita password, which unlocked the Chaos Combo card. So Desmond just swapped the K and T, and that's how we all came to see the Etika moniker. I wanted to make mention of this to pay respect to Etika. I didn't follow his live streams when he was still around, but I had plenty of friends who were huge fans of his, and it's pretty tragic to think that he's been gone 5 whole years now. Also, Etika and I share a birthday. He was born in 1990, I was born in 98, but he's still always on my mind whenever my birthday comes up. So I just wanted to thank him for all the entertainment he gave me and my friends, and may you rest in peace, Desmond. Joy-Con boys for life. And I think that just about wraps up all I have to say about Sonic Battle. It's a very unique game in the franchise that I'm sure has its own following. I enjoyed the story and the characterizations for the most part. The gameplay is impressive and solid, but is incredibly repetitive to the game's detriment. But in spite of my personal gripes, I still recommend playing this game if you haven't, especially if you're into fighting games and most likely cringed watching me cheat to the end. This doesn't play like a normal Sonic game, so in a way, it's probably a bit more accessible for some people. Again, my cousin Andrew really liked this game and he's not even a Sonic fan. It's got a fun and engaging story throughout it, and I think it really helps the game stand well. The soundtrack is fantastic too. I can't reiterate that enough. At the time of this review, Sonic Battle has never been ported, and it doesn't seem like Sega has any plans to port it either. As much as I would love to see the Advanced Trilogy get re-released on either a future Sonic collection, or even the Switch's GBA Online app, I also really hope this doesn't lead to Sonic Battle getting left behind in the process. More fans should have access to this game without needing to emulate, or play the game on an actual GBA or DS, though I'd still say playing the game on the GameCube's GBA player is the best way to experience this game. Until that day comes when Battle and the rest of the Advanced games are re-released, be sure to go check out these neat little Sonic titles in any way you can, and I guess this means I can finally wrap up my original intent of reviewing the mainline Sonic GBA games. Unless you're watching this in the GBA compilation video. If that's the case, then I hope you enjoy the next reviews.
Sonic Advance 3!
Why do people hate this game? I think Sonic Advance 3 is brilliant. I'm not joking. Why do so many Sonic fans hate this game? Is it Johnny's fault? I think this is one of the best and most underrated Sonic games I've ever played. Like, seriously. I love Sonic Advance 3 so dang much. Sonic Advance 3 was released in June 2004 to commemorate the Sonic franchise's 13th anniversary. The game was developed in a span of nearly 2 years after Sonic Advance 2 was released. The first time I got to play Sonic Advance 3 was, in fact, on the PSP of all systems. My cousin had a modded one with a bunch of emulators on it, so it ended up having a GBA emulator that just so happened to have Sonic Advance 3. First time playing it, I remember having a lot of fun with it. I think I made it about as far as the second zone until I had to stop playing it. A few years later, I got an actual copy of the game and played through the whole thing, even getting all the emeralds, and I absolutely loved it. Why? Well, let's have a look. The plot of Sonic Advance 3 involves Dr. Eggman trying to get all the Chaos Emeralds, again, so he could try to build his own utopia, Eggman Land, which, spoiler alert, won't happen for another 4 years. So Sonic and the gang have got to stop him, you know, the same old same old. While trying to stop Eggman, they come across a Gizoid named Gemerald, built by Dr. Eggman. Gemerald was apparently reconstructed after another Gizoid, Emerald, which was a main character from Sonic Battle. Interesting how closely connected the handheld games are, continuity-wise. Spoilers, I mean, you saw this coming, but Sonic and company stop Dr. Eggman and Gemerald, though in the true ending, Gemerald uses all the Chaos Emeralds from Sonic to morph into a powerful being. Thankfully, Sonic is still able to use the Emeralds to go super, and in a rare moment for the franchise, teams up with Dr. Eggman to stop this Super Gemerald. They defeat Gemerald, who kinda just crashes on the beach somewhere. However, Gemerald is taken in and repaired by Tails, who gives Gemerald to Cream and her mother Vanilla as sort of a new best friend for them. I love happy endings. Advance 3's story is simple, but it also has a lot of layers to it, which is pretty impressive for a handheld title at the time to pull off. The cutscenes are really cute, and we often get fun interactions whenever you unlock certain characters at the end of zones. The sprite work in these cutscenes look phenomenal, about as good as they could have looked on the Game Boy Advance screen. That image of Cream hugging Gemerald in the final cutscene is sort of my permanent Twitter banner now. It's just one of my favorite moments in the whole series. So Advance 3 had a fun story. Now how does the game play? Sonic Advance 3 uses the same gameplay style as the last two games, with its own new features and improvements to boot. For starters, we have a brand new partner system implemented. This allows you to pair up any of the 5 characters you can play as in the game. These characters include Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Cream, and Amy! Amy in Advance 3 is thankfully unlocked after clearing Zone 4, and she's a whole lot better in this game. Depending on who you're paired up with, each of the characters have a variety of different movesets. This is one of the many reasons why I love the partner system. Sonic and Co can still use their normal moves, but again, depending on who you're paired with, you can get different moves. I usually just pair Sonic and Tails because they're the default. You can use a partner move by holding the R shoulder button. This allows the partner to hop in your hands, and letting go of R will make you do a certain move. It's different for most characters, but for Sonic and Tails, letting go of R can cause Sonic to slam dunk Tails and launch straight into the air. I love this move. It's amazing for skipping areas. There's so many shortcuts to be made with this. So yeah, the partner system has a lot of expansion to provide with each new character you unlock. There are some kinda meh combinations, but I would argue that most of them are pretty good and fun. A lot of people actually turn on this game because of the partner system and say it completely ruins the game just because there are bad combinations. Guys, if you see a combination you don't like using, here's a great idea. Don't use them. Wow, crazy, right? It's not really a big deal, and the levels themselves can really make the gameplay more fun. There's 7 zones in this game, which are Route 99, Sunset Hill, Ocean Base, Toy Kingdom, Twinkle Snow, Cybertrack, and Chaos Angel. Route 99 is a fun introduction level. It's like a 2D city escape. How could I hate this? Sunset Hill is a wonderful zone, and it's really beautiful. Ocean Base is alright. Kinda difficult, and there are a few crusher segments that can catch you off guard at first. Apart from that, decent level. Toy Kingdom is sort of the colorful middle point for the game, sort of how we'd usually get a casino themed level at this part of the game, but this time it's taking the form of a Toy Kingdom. Gotta say, I love the choice of colors here. There's a lot of fun set pieces too. Just an all around fun zone. I love Twinkle Snow. One of the best snow levels in any Sonic game. It's so damn pretty. Look at the background, look at the blue. So colorful and great. Cybertrack is pretty cool. It's the techno-based level that has some surprisingly fun anti-gravity segments in it, which is interesting because I'm usually not a fan of these type of mechanics in 2D, but Advance 3 nailed it here. Chaos Angel is a great final zone, but it does drag on for a bit. I will say it's a very unique final stage for this game. Usually most Sonic games end with a death egg or just a machinery type level, but for Advance 3 they tried something different and I think it worked out really well. If there is one thing I'd change about this zone, I'd swap Acts 2 and 3. Act 3 is an auto-scroller and doesn't really fit for a final level. Act 2 definitely feels more grand. I'd even go as far to say it's one of my favorite acts in the game. Then again, you could just play Act 3 before Act 2 if you wanted to. How? Well, Advance 3 introduced another new idea. Hub areas! Yep, you can run around these little hub areas and jump into whichever act of a zone you want to play first. This is a really cool idea. I think Dimps pulled this off really well. They're small and compact enough to where you won't get lost in them, which is very nice. I have heard some people say they're difficult to navigate in, but I personally disagree with that. Now for the level design. This is where people seem to be split on this game. Some people say it's great, other people say it's god-awful and there's too many bottomless pits and crusher segments. For me, I personally love the level designs. Every level was filled with all sorts of routes and hidden items to find. What I think the problems that a lot of people who hate this game seem to have is they probably liked Advance 2 more. Like, Advance 2 is probably their favorite and all. Nothing wrong with that, but I would argue it's not really fair to approach Advance 3 as if it'll play exactly like Advance 2. Advance 2 was filled with a lot of non-stop speed segments. You were mostly just holding right to win. Every level was like this, and I personally think it's a lazy way of doing level designs for 2D Sonic. It sort of reminds me of the autopilot 3D segments in Sonic Forces, you know? I think 2D Sonic has a lot more potential than just hold right to win. But I know people have differing preferences, so you can't really please everyone. Oh well. For me though, I think Sonic Advance 3 has some of the best 2D level designs in any Sonic game. Let me explain. A lot of Sonic Advance 3 consists of platforming, segments where you gotta slow down and jump on some platforms, or maybe even explore environments in order to reach the goal. Yeah, Advance 3 has a lot of exploration, and it does a really solid job with it. The different pathways also add a lot to the experience because it can seriously add a lot of replay value to the game, making each revisit unique with whichever route you want to venture through. When you finally get this mindset of pacing yourself accordingly, whenever you do get into segments where you can run fast, I gotta say, it's pretty goddamn gratifying. That is how you do it. Speed is supposed to be a reward, not something you're handed so easily. I love running fast and all, but if that's literally all you're gonna be doing in the game, where's the reward? Where's the substance? I'm gonna get bored easily. Something else I noticed about Advance 2 is that after a certain zone, even going fast punishes you because suddenly that game wants you to pay attention and mind your surroundings. Otherwise, you're gonna keep dying. It tries to have its cake and eat it too, but Advance 2 just fails at it so hard. And I think Advance 3's level designs did this way better. I'd almost say Advance 3 perfected this way of structuring the levels. The game doesn't want you to mindlessly hold right. It asks the player to be on their feet for everything. Once you master this way of playing it, then you'll realize, there really isn't a whole lot of crusher segments like most people have been saying about this game. I know I am asking for the impossible for most of the Sonic fanbase to relax and approach this game with a more chillaxed mindset than a we gotta go fast attitude, but come on y'all, this game ain't that bad. One thing I especially like about Advance is that it takes a lot of ideas from the adventure games, especially since these were made in the same time period. Like, remember this thing from Ocean Base? It kinda reminds me of this thing from Adventure 2 and Skyrail. What is this thing? Another thing that further highlights the adventure era is the grind rails. Grinding was kind of established since the first game. In Advance 1, it was a very rare set piece that only really Sonic and Amy could use. The only time it really happened was in the first zone. In Advance 2, however, it was greatly overused, and not to mention the grind rail didn't even function that well. It came off more annoying than fun to use most of the time. In Advance 3, however, thanks to the much improved level designs, the grind rails are much better implemented here. Not to mention they function so much better than they did in Advance 2, so they're incredibly helpful and actually fun to use. This is the first time in a 2D Sonic game where I felt that grind railing was really cool. I think that's all I have to say about the level designs in this game. I don't know what else to say. There are just moments during this game where I just had a smile on my face. This game just makes me so happy, even during the more frustrating moments. But I don't even hate the game when I encounter these parts. Why? Well, when I do end up feeling fatigued by a video game, I do this amazing method called taking a break. Why do most people forget to do this? If you've been playing a game for so long that you're starting to get sick of seeing/playing it, then maybe stop playing it for a while. Of course you're gonna end up hating the game if you keep on playing it, come on now. Moving on, the soundtrack! I love Sonic Advance 3's soundtrack so much. It's so catchy and perfect. I'd easily say it's the best of the whole trilogy. Advance 1 still has a great soundtrack, and I'll even say Advance 2's soundtrack was the best part of that game. It was really catchy and energetic like a Sonic soundtrack should be. The soundtrack for Sonic Advance 3 though, is just so well constructed and composed. Every single music piece is brilliant and fits their environments amazingly. Even for the Game Boy Advance's sound chip, it sounds great. Though again, I'd highly recommend the remaster edition of the soundtrack, since it really helps show how great the GBA instruments sound. Even from just the opening menu, you can hear how well made the soundtrack is. Just listen to that 32-bit banjo. I swear to God, it sounds like I'm hearing a banjo. I love Route 99's fast pacing. This music track would even get a slight remix in Generations. Like, that is how good this level's music is. There's even Green Hill Zone remixes for all the Sunset Hill levels, which further adds on to this zone's theme of bringing Sonic back to his roots and reminding us of his past in a really special way. That's how it's done, baby. Love this remix. Twinkle Snow especially benefits from the soundtrack too. The music here sounds about as beautiful as the level itself. Can someone do a remix of this using a piano and violin combo? Please? Chaos Angel is the last one I'll highlight. I love how grand the music sounds in this zone. Act 3 is my absolute favorite since at this point, the music sounds more intense and epic here. Just wish the actual level could have been that too. Still though, this is a fantastic piece of level music. The soundtrack for Sonic Advance 3 is just incredible. It's a fantastic send-off for this old style until Sonic Rush turns it into Jet Set Radio. Now, I love Sonic Rush's soundtrack, don't get me wrong, but I also appreciate a good, regular Sonic sounding soundtrack whenever we get one. Moving on, the boss fights in this game are really interesting. Almost all of them involve these clever ways of figuring out how to hit Eggman. A lot of the bosses are just really creative. I love the Jack in the Box one a lot. The one where you bounce the spears back at Eggman is also great. Plus the rolling one highlights a feature that I love about the partner system that's also kinda broken. Even when off screen, your partner can kill enemies for you, which includes getting easy hits on Eggman in all the fights, which I find both hilarious and a ton of fun. I love this game so much, you guys. The one boss I will say I'm not too big on is the Twinkle Snow boss. If any of you have played this game, you'd understand why, but for first time players, when you get to this point, make sure you've mastered your platforming skills, because otherwise you're fucked. Holy shit. So the partners are really useful in these fights. Hell, I could even use Tails' tails as an attack when flying, which is how I chose to stop the pre-final boss. So yeah, enjoy learning that exploit. Before I discuss the true final boss, we gotta talk about one final thing: emerald hunting. This is how it works. First off, you gotta find Chao. In each zone, there are 10 Chao you need to look for, which sounds a little tedious and... okay, it kind of is. However, one thing I like about the Chao in Advance 3 over the gold rings in Advance 2 is that once you collect the Chao, you never have to recollect them, and the game auto-saves your progress. So you don't even have to finish the level after getting all the Chao. You can pause, hit back, then choose another act to go look for more Chao. This simple feature makes me not mind looking for the Chao. I did get stuck a couple times, but some helpful Sonic fans did create these guides to help find all the Chao, so if you're struggling to find some, just look these up. Another highlight for Advance 3's level design is that the explorative parts actually made me stumble across a few Chao while on my adventure, which was always a fun surprise. Also, I love the little soundbite whenever you pick up a Chao. Oh shit, how the fuck did I almost forget? Sonic Advance 3 had voice acting! Well, partial voice acting, but all the characters have these fun little voice clips which just makes me smile a lot. Why? Because this game is using the Adventure cast, which was my favorite voice cast. So Ryan Drummond is Sonic, William Corkery is Tails, Scott Dreyer is Knuckles, Jenny Dillard is Amy, and the late Dean Bristow is Dr. Eggman. What is kinda sad though is that this would end up being Dean Bristow's final voice role since he would pass away a few months after the game got released. Really sad. This would also be the last time Drummond and the rest of the Adventure crew would be used to voice all these characters as well. Huh. This game really was the end of an era. Where was I? Oh yeah, emerald hunting. After you finish finding all 10 Chao in a zone, you're granted permission to collect the special key in any act of the zone. Obviously, the special key is used for activating the special spring which is hidden in each hub area. How do you find the special key? Well, my best advice is just play any of the acts normally, because you'll eventually come across the key, sometimes just out in the open for grabs. It's pretty great that they made getting the keys designed this way, and not overcomplicating it by putting them in hard to reach locations. Also, no, you can't collect one key in another zone and use it in a completely different zone. That's kinda cheating. But you can stock up on keys, which is nice, and can help give you multiple tries at the special stages, and trust me, you're gonna need them. The special stages in Sonic Advance 3 look really great for the GBA, but the depth perception can be pretty bad here, for most people at least. For me, the first time I played these stages, I hated them. I thought they were irritatingly bad. Though on my second attempt at these stages, I actually ended up beating most of them in just one try. The only two that gave me trouble were, expectedly, stages 6 and 7, which makes sense, they are the last two. I guess, just be good at placing yourself for the rings, and definitely try to get these boost segments down to a T because they really help with beating these stages since they could double your rings. So yeah, the special stages are okay, just a really tough challenge when you play them at first. They are miles better than Advance 2 special stages, and that's all that matters. Okay, so after collecting all 7 Chaos Emeralds, Sonic goes super and teams up with Eggman for the true final battle of the trilogy. This final boss is pretty good. Confusing at first, but once you realize you gotta charge up Eggman, then dash at Gemerald's eye a bunch of times, it becomes a total cakewalk. I really love this final battle. It does feel very grandiose, and it's one of the most memorable parts of the game for me. One thing I love about all the boss fights in this game is that they just give me a good yes feeling whenever I beat them. And that feeling definitely was present when I beat this final boss. Such a great way to end this amazing game. I guess with all that said, Sonic Advance 3 is the best out of the Advance trilogy to me. There's just so much here that I love. I love the direction the level designs take, I love the soundtrack, the voice acting, the art style, the boss fights, the hub areas, I love this game, you guys. There's just so much here for me to really admire. If a game can get me to smile most of the time while I play it, then I think that counts for something. This isn't just the best out of the Advance trilogy, but I think this is Dimp's best Sonic game, hands down. It has so much heart, and I think this game gets a sour reputation by people who probably didn't give it a chance. There's a lot more here than just, bottomless pits and crusher segments. The game is so much better than you'd probably think. Sonic Advance 3 is one of the best Sonic games ever made. It may not be perfect, but Sonic Advance 3 is a game that has greatly grown on me over the years. I loved it when I first played it, and I love it even more after all this time of playing it. Advance 3 is great. Seeing that emotional, touching ending made completing this game feel so great. I love the idea that Gemerald went from this huge threat to this friendly robot that became Cream's new best friend. It's adorable. And it further highlights another theme this game likes to have, which is everyone deserves a happy ending, no matter who you are. Okay, that may not be the intended feeling, but that's honestly how I felt when completing this game. Sonic Advance 3 is just great, you guys. It really does feel like the end of an era. It almost made me tear up whenever I realized that. This is not only the last time I'll ever get to hear my favorite Eggman voice actor, but it's also probably the last time I'll get to hear Ryan as Sonic, Scott as Knuckles, and Jennifer as Amy. It's just sad, but it makes me happy. I don't know how to describe it, but this game just makes me happy. I guess I'm just happy to have found such a great game in one of my favorite franchises, which nowadays is seen as a laughingstock. So I think that's why I love this game so much. Kinda reminds me for my love for Unleashed too. Back to the soundtrack for a bit, that staff roll music is just incredible. Such a perfect way to end this game and this trilogy. It feels like Dimps is bidding farewell to something, be it this era of Sonic, the Game Boy Advance itself, whatever it is, it just feels really nice. Like the finishing chapter to a book. Just thank you, Sonic Advance 3. Thank you for existing and for making me so happy. You're not like any other Sonic game I've ever played. Nope, not even Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Thank you for being unique, and thank you for all the good times. I appreciate this game so much for its pureness and overall great structure. Thank you, 2004 Dimps. Thank you. Also, suck it, Johnny! 2006 was a rough year for the Hedgehog. While it was the 15th anniversary of the series, it just wasn't the best time. More specifically, the worst happened on November 14th, 2006, or as most Sonic fans remember this day as, the Apocalypse. While Sonic 2006 has its own set of issues to talk about, that game's not the point of this video. On the exact same day Sonic 2006 was released, Sonic 1 received the port on the Game Boy Advance, dubbed Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis. This version of Sonic 1 is widely considered to be one of the worst Sonic games ever released. What in the fuck happened here? Screen crunch to the max, slowdown is a constant issue, weird fucking bugs and glitches throughout, and the music! Oh god! What the hell happened? The GBA sound font isn't perfect, but it's capable of sounding better than this. Holy shit, the remixes we heard in Sonic Advance sounded better than this. How? You know what, I was probably being way too harsh on the Sega Smash Pack port. That wasn't a massacre, this was. At the very least, the music for Starlight Zone at least ended up sounding okay, which is good news for me because it's my favorite Sonic 1 level, but that does not excuse the rest of this soundtrack and all the other problems with this port. Like, this is fucking terrible. They clearly rushed this shitty port out on the market to coincide with Sonic 2006, a game that was also terribly rushed. What a disaster. But are there any good features in this terrible port? Well, there's an original mode and an anniversary mode. What's the difference? The anniversary mode lets you use the spin dash. That's it. That's where the positives end. As a huge Sonic 1 fan myself, this port is fucking abysmal. It's almost insulting to play. You know what makes this worse? At one point, I actually managed to play through the whole damn port and even got all 6 Chaos Emeralds. Which, by the way, was not fun because the speed in the special stages were sped up to an almost unplayable degree. Like, what the fuck is going on? And you know what my reward was for completing this terrible port at 100%? I unlocked the ability to listen to this port's shitty sound effects in the jukebox. Yeah, fuck Sonic Genesis. Honestly, you want a decent handheld port of Sonic 1 that's obviously not the HD remaster? Then you're better off getting the Genesis collection on PSP, which actually released in the same year as Sonic Genesis. Even if you were a Nintendo fan at the time, just get a DS and wait a few years for the Sonic Classic collection in 2010, which played so much better. Hell, you got a 2DS or 3DS? Get the Sonic 1 port on that one. It even has the spin dash. Wow, that's pretty sweet. So, what? Was it just not possible for Sonic 1 to have been ported to the GBA properly? Well, apparently the gameplay engine for this port was a similar one that was used for the Advance games. And the reason why the game runs so poorly is because the Advance engine wasn't built to load as many assets as that of a Genesis game. So the port suffers from constant slowdown as a result. So now it's a fucking headache to play through. Wanna know something really funny? In 2008, a fan went out of their way to make a proof of concept version of Sonic 1, which ports over the game in perfectly playable condition. Yes, it's called Sonic the Hedgehog GBA, and it plays amazingly well. There is screen crunch as expected, but apart from that, this proof of concept shows that it was absolutely 100% possible for Sonic 1 to be ported to the GBA just fine. Even the music sounds pretty decent, how the fuck? This version only includes the first 3 acts of Green Hill Zone and 2 special stages. Yeah, again, it's just a proof of concept, not the whole thing. The person who made this did an amazing job with this. They even went as far to add in the ability to play as both Tails and Knuckles, who both have their abilities from Sonic 3 and Knuckles ported over too. What the fuck? So who exactly made this great proof of concept? Well, it was none other than Simon Tomley, aka Stealth. The same guy who would help Christian Whitehead remaster Sonic 1 and 2 on mobile, and would later go on to help make Sonic Mania. I'm glad to see his career took off pretty far after this proof of concept. I tip my hat to you, Simon, along with Christian Whitehead and the rest of the team that worked on Sonic Mania. Keep up the good work, boys. Oh yeah, and Sonic Genesis, it can fuck right off.